Welcome, worldographers and world builders alike, to episode 3 of The World Hammer, where I read lore from across the multiverse and perhaps yours. All the entries seen here are submitted by talented writers from our Atovia Discord community based on a daily prompt project called Build Together and tagged for World Hammer. If you would like your own works read aloud, you are not only welcome, but encouraged to join our Discord and submit your own. Now back to the Forge to see what's been built. I missed an entry for day 335 that Nugget had written a little bit late, but still it was one that I wanted to get to. And Nugget thankfully reminded me before I was finished recording this episode. And so we'll read that now. It's from day 335, where the prompt was, like the phoenix on Earth, what is a symbol of rebirth in your world? Nugget writes, Requiem for a Wilting Rose, an entry in Petrichor. Roses are possibly the most important piece of symbolism in Petrichor, and also one of the oldest. Roses in general represent love and passion, and in the context of Ambrose, Lockhart represents death and rebirth. A wilting rose in a Gothic manner was the earliest tone inspiration behind Petrichor, something so bright and beautiful representing love and passion, wilting and dying all the same while maintaining that grotesque beauty. Love between Ambrose and Edward grew so possessive it rots, yet despite the thorns wrapped around their hearts, the flowers were what they fell in love with, and the pain just means they're closer to one another. They live in the same skin if they could. The Decayed is the god of rot, of death, of disease, of natural cycles, and rebirth. While mostly seen as a death god, its namesake is in decay, the breaking down of dead matter to give new life. Through rot, fungus and flowers grow. There is a reason cemeteries are described as gardens of the decayed and corpses are flowers their god took too soon. In most contexts, its flowers are shown as roses. Roses rotting and wilting before regrowing from rot and death as new life and the beginning of a new cycle. Even disease can be symbolized with roses as a reference to Ring Around the Rosie, a poem about the bubonic plague, and how people would stuff rose petals into their pockets to cover the stench of disease. A practice Ambrose is quite partial to. Ambrose has a fascination with roses. It's his favorite flower. He has an entire greenhouse filled with them that he's known for spending a lot of time in. His coat is heavily embroidered with roses. He's been told his entire life that he is special, that he is the Decayed's favorite flower. But he is wilting away. His disease is wearing away at his very bones. He knows his time is limited. He stops at nothing to prevent his death, of joining the garden of his god, yet his body still rots and decays. Mushrooms cling to his ribs, maggots eat into his flesh, and the roses, oh, the roses. They grow within his lungs. They fill his stomach. The thorns puncture his eyes. For as much as he fears his god, he is truly its vessel. As he becomes more powerful, he can control organic and rotting matter, and we see this a lot with his roses. His dying and rotting roses wilting to dust as he uses his magic, much like how necromancy is affecting himself. Roses, while beautiful, are not meant to last, yet there is still something so pretty about how they die. Edward is less directly associated with roses than his husband, yet he almost exclusively calls him Rose. Edward is associated with the red god, and much like roses and wine and blood, it's the color of passion. For whatever Edward feels, it's with every fiber of his being. The thorns around his heart are merely proof his husband is near, and though the petals in his lungs prevent his breath, they remind him so much of his beloved. But Edward is not associated with roses. He's associated with music and poetry. He's the one playing a somber violin, playing a requiem for a wilting rose. He's the gift to see how the world could be, and a voice that can bring the world back together. Where his husband brings death, Edward sings life. What Ambrose touches withers away. Edward brings it back. A rose, wilting and rotting and using death to regrow. Petrichor, after all, is a love story. Petrichor, after all, is a tragedy. Very pretty piece from Nugget. As always, I'm glad we got to this one. For day 341, the prompt was, what is the most impressive feat done by mortal hands in your world? And this comes from The Wanderer in the Discord. Parwin the Great writes, God is here. God is angry. An entry in Rust and Blood. Content warning. War, death, brutality, homophobic imagery, and I cannot stress this enough, this guy dies brutally. The entry begins here. A mighty congregation of true believers waits with bated breath on the outskirts of the great ram site of Fault. In their vanguard, high Axion Southos Heketh stands in his enchanted mail, 3 heads above the average man. He raises his great maul into the air, and as it shines against the light of day, the blessed pigment of Rom flashes in repeating patterns behind him.
Our rulers have sinned.
A voice, deep and coercive, spoke behind Salthos, enforcing his words, the voice of Rom.
They have sent us into damnation, into the name of the Pain Fiend, in the name of Ragash.
Salthos pointed his maul to the silver shield over turmoil, the bastion to guard against the outside, the rotting, fetid hands of a celestial or Ragash pressing against the barrier, pressing inward.
We can only be saved in their death, in their damnation. So is the word of Rom.
Salthos pauses expectingly.
So is the word of Rom,
the masses respond.
The 7 saints die in this era. The years of turmoil for her people will rise.
They will rise and destroy the foe, or make a last stand that shakes the realm of the gods. Demons will fear us, Murricanians will dread us, and greenskins will cower from us. We will unite the world. We will bring down the swift hammer of doom unto the enemies of life. The crowd of believers, were hallowed, script-scrying snipers, Exians and lower-ranked Axians, cheer for their leader, for Salthos, the 40th death tongue of Rom. The siege was not long, a mere 3 hours of barraging the walls of Fault with their artillery, and with Salthos' personal tread bastion ramming into the soul steel fortifications as it arrived on the battlefield. The hale streets of the ram site, empty though they appeared, were teeming with small pockets of soldiers who heeded the words of the 7 saints. Faithless met faithful, and for the first time in a very long time, Rom itself guided its soldiers. Strikes were evaded with ease. Visions of incoming barrages warned even the most mundane soldier under Salthos' command. Every last man and woman felt the guiding hand of Rom on their shoulders, pushing them from harm's way and pulling them to victory. Despite the napalm, artillery barrages, and devastating power of Salthos' spells that shook buildings, not a single member of the faithful suffered so much as a scratch. Salthos marched to the great office of the Saint of Fault, the nameless old man who created the scry snipers with his perverse ideals. He walked with care as his Rom told him where to step. Artillery shells dodged by a hair. Bullets pinged off his righteous mail, and brave soldiers meeting their ends as his maul sent them into the walls with such force that they were vaporized on impact. If only, Salthos thought to himself, if only they knew, if only they heeded my words. Salthos had spent a week preaching the word of Rom from the loudspeakers in his Gallard Grau main battle tank. He had preached gospel, but they ignored him, likely out of loyalty to the sinner king hiding in his palace of lies. With a single movement, Salthos kicked the mighty steel doors off their hinges, flinging them into the waiting guards and crushing them beneath the bulk. Castellan's personal guard charged Salthos in melee. Their enchanted swords and might of Grasham would have posed a threat if only Salthos couldn't see every strike they'd make against him. Parrying, dodging, and blocking their blows, one by one Salthos sent them to the bleak shore. He flung one into the stained glass window, her screams quitting as she fell into the city below. Another he grabbed by the throat, lifting the man up with one hand and choking him while Salthos dealt with the others. He dropped the broken-necked warrior and braced for another wave of Castellans. Their might was unmatched among mortals, but all it took was a flick of Salthos' wrist as a spell of dark water flung them out from the same window Salthos once prayed at as a serf. Salthos walked up the dozen flights of stairs, meeting more warriors and ending them all the same, but at their peak he found the one he had been told of in visions, the warlord of Grashum, Argus Thane. Never before have 2 champions of a celestial stood in the same room. Never before have 2 champions fought one another. Never before has a champion died in combat. Salthos looked at Argus, and Argus looked back. The 2 humans, gods, braced for the first blow. But Salthos saw that Argus would not strike first. His vision granted him clarity. Salthos lowered his maul to his side. Argus paused for a moment before sheathing his blade. He stared blankly at Salthos through his helm, his eyes dancing with relief, with the freedom from fear. Argus made his way past Salthos down the stairs into the chaos below. The ornate, opulent door into the Sinner King's room towered above Salthos. Its seams enchanted by protective spells that Salthos would need decades to decode and break, but he was not alone. Visions flooded his mind, passing thoughts and echoing voices. Theologist supreme. The code, how ego-driven, how vain. The door shifted, its hinges swinging open slowly with the weight of the solid marble door. Graviturgy strained to keep the mechanism from collapsing. Inside, hiding behind his desk, the Saint of Fault cowered before the champion of Rom.
"Heretic!"
The old fool crowed. "Dementia-ridden leech," Salthos responded. He walked slowly to the shriveled old man. His creations were in the room, scry snipers, but they had been stricken with understanding the moment they saw Salthos. Their god-sight showed them the shadow looming over him. Rom was here. It was present.
Shoot him dead!"
The old man begged to his attendants, but from the dark shadows of his office they walked out, leaving the room.
"Heretics, all of you sinners with damned souls! Rom will not forgive you for abandoning me."
"Will I? Me?" The voice of God filled the room.
No, you trick me, sinner. You cannot fool me. Rom told me of your coming. He said...
"The pain fiend told you of my coming. You are lied to, a fool who worships the very foe."
"You will not trick me, sinner. Rom commands me. He tells me of your sins. He tells me of your preference of companion. You would lay with another man. You freakish sinner, you are damned."
Salthos shivered for a moment, but it passed. A calm, cold rage surged through him. "I never realized just how manipulative Ragash was until just now."
"Do not utter the name of the pain fiend in this most holy of chambers."
"Everything the cultists do is heretical. Art, community, friends, and their most vile sins of homosexuality amongst each other. All things that promote happiness in one's life. Their freedom of choice. You would think Ragash would not allow them such things, but I see it now. We are their opposites. We are the ones suffering, the ones feeding it, feeding the pain fiend."
"Lies!"
"Is it, you mottled old fool? Look below you, out your window. Look at your citizens down there." Salthos let out a fake laugh. "Oh, wait! There aren't any. Every last mother, father, son, and daughter of Rom is at war. They are in the trenches of Kamar, dying of dysentery and syphilis. They are so unbelievably faithful to you and the other 6 perverted bastards of Ramexia that they look upon their open wounds and call them blessings. For they alone are given the righteous permission to fight and die for Rom, when it is Ragash they die for." Salthos stepped forwards, his weighted armor denting the metal floor with each furious stomp he took.
"Stay back!"
the saint shouted, but Salthos had already thrown his mahogany table out the window behind him. Salthos reached around his throat and lifted him to the edge. The saint choked on blood as Salthos slammed his fist into the man's gut. Vicious crunches and the sound of popping organs came from the saint's abdomen. Blood spilled from the man's groin as the force of the blow ruptured his bowels. "Look at me, sinner," Salthos demanded in a cold tone. "I want to see the look of realization on your eyes as you drift close to death and see the shadow looming over me." The saint did look up, and behind Salthos, his eyes lit up with fear, barbed wire and floating corpses twisting and winding in patterns of eldritch impossibility. Eyes of an angry celestial looked down at him, the furious pupils of Rom.
"No,"
the man barely coughed out.
"No, Rom, I...
The light faded from his eyes. Salthos stood still for a moment, the saint dangling out from the window as a limp corpse, his white gown stained with a fetid mixture of blood and bile. "Rom, damn it." Salthos brought his corpse back in, and holding his hand out, Salthos casted prestidigitation. The saint's clothes were clean, though still tattered. Walking out from the door to the chapel, Salthos carried the body of the saint with him. His forces stood waiting, covered in the blood of their enemy. "Gather the dead, bury them as you would family. This is the word of Rom." "This is the word of Rom!" And thus, in the ashes of destruction, the ambrosia flowed forth. Man, really fantastic narrative sequence. Predwin, as you write more and more of these, you're getting pretty solid at them, and I feel like I did a good job in this one. I was really in it in the moment, and I hope I did justice to the voice acting here. It's not going to be quite as quality as Predwin's because I don't have the time to spend on a single thing, but I'm doing my best over here. The Wanderer writes, "The Hathbran Engine. Those who have read any of my other tales by now know that the old world in Endrin was filled with powerful gods, powerful mortals, and powerful monsters. While the most impressive feat was Artaban's star, I have already told that tale, so we will ignore its presence for now. So we'll look to the next impressive feat, the Hathbran Engine. See, Humans didn't exist in those olden days. There were, however, mortals, people who would age, wither, and die, and some of those people really didn't want to die from monsters, so they designed a system, a protection, if you will. They wanted to build a city big enough to house them, but especially big enough that people invading couldn't find them in the city, so they constructed a powerful machine. The machine would construct a city, and after many failed attempts and many accidental casualties, they built it. Their machine, after much trial and error, worked very well. They could have it build cities and repair them indefinitely, all while keeping the machinations perfectly out of sight. They had constructed what would eventually be known as the Halfbrand engine, a great arcane masterpiece that consumed barren land and stone and spat out cities and any manner of architecture. Unfortunately, like many powerful artifacts of the old world, eventually the wrong hands got a hold of it. In this case, it was a king whose name is entirely forgotten to time. And to hide his empire from others, he had the engine construct a vast labyrinth around his kingdom. But as paranoid and greedy as he was, he took the engine outside of his kingdom and buried it deep in the earth. He was also cruel, and eventually was rebelled against for his childish tantrums that ended in mass executions. However, he didn't pass on the engine's location, so it continued, and thus was born the labyrinth, which now spans the entirety of Endron. This makes me think of Blam, the manga. The whole idea of like machines constructing layered cities and them being colossal and maze-like and traversable in their entirety by simple mortals. Really cool vibe we've got here, and the origin story of a labyrinth in Endron, which I did not know was a thing. So that's cool. For day 342, the prompt was, what technology in your world do most of its citizens regret the creation of? Kendamarania writes, The Great Black Roaring, an entry in City of Woe. Monday, August 6th, 1945. I thought today was going to be just a normal day. Just me and the others on our vehicle looking for any sinners that could be used for our city and its power reserves. We managed to capture a few sinners and tied them to the back of our truck. The war above proved fruitless for us. We were singing happily to the tunes of the car radio as the sinners in the trunk were struggling with their gags on. All those humans on Earth killing each other only meant we could reap the benefits of their pointless war. Plenty of soldiers and civilians of all tongues came for us to quickly bring them back to Malifern. And then the ground shook, like a great roaring here in these fields, and then the black rain came. Limbo is no stranger to unusual weather. We regularly have to put up with raining fire and storms of shrapnel, to name a few, but this torrent of pitch-black rain felt different. The rumbling from the ground nearly tipped our truck over. My coworkers simply shrugged it off as another instance of hell's wrath. But as we kept driving, we began seeing more and more sinners. Hundreds, thousands even rising from the ground, all Japanese. Most unusual was, for at least the Japanese, we mainly captured men, soldiers of war, but for miles and miles upon the endless fields, young civilian men, women, children, all rose. We captured as many as we could, but even we were beginning to get concerned as to what exactly happened. Upon our inspection of their formation in hell, it seemed all of them died of some form of fire or being crushed by rubble. More and more sinners kept rising out, with what seemed to be some sort of burn marks. The heavy black rain finally got into our truck and halted our engine, putting us at a complete stop. We boarded the last sinner we could fit in, a middle-aged Japanese woman crying over something, but she kept moaning about it in her native language. Even the other sinners we caught were turning their heads towards her, the other Japanese shaking their heads in despair. One of the other retrievers, Xavier, was about to gag her and slit her vocal cords out before our squad leader, Tarksovi, pinned her fur in place. "What in all God's name are you thinking?" Tarksovi barked at her. "Listen, we're stuck here with our comms down. We may as well learn what the heck happened on Earth." "What is there to know?" "She probably died from an American bombing raid, simple as that," Xavier retorted back, trying to wring out the black rain off her long fur. Tarksovi forced the woman to turn her back, showing the gridded black scars along her upper back. "You call this normal? Something must have happened on Earth." I finally stepped up in the trunk, gulping hard to the one act that would probably get me fired. "Can anyone here speak Japanese and speak to us in common?" I announced to the sinners. "If you can, raise your hand. If you can, we will try to lighten your punishment in this fiery belly." None of the sinners responded except for one Brazilian man who shakily raised his hand to his chest. We ungagged him and put off his blindfold, with our barrels right on his head. Please, Pobeme dos demonios." "I can understand and speak it a bit," the Brazilian cried out, hands up. "Translate, or you'll understand what it means to be a sinner down here," Tarksovi commanded him as the sinner inched towards the sobbing lady. The two conversed, the Brazilian sinner hugging and trying to comfort her in her native language. The woman was clinging on to him, begging him something. From the little Japanese that I knew, it seemed that she was begging him for the whereabouts of his son. The sinner finally turned back to us. She says a bomb happened. Something she's never seen before, like a bright flash. A single plane dropped it, he reported back. One bomb did that? I gasped. How did they? Ask about the burns. The Brazilian asked precisely that. The woman was clutching her aching body, the black scars on her back showing. She was chattering her teeth as she spoke. It was like being set on fire 1,000 feet away. She couldn't move. All of it was just pain and misery, the sinner responded. What was the destruction? Were all these people from the bomb? Tarksovi barked at him, pushing the barrel to the back of his head. He asked her, and she shook her head. The woman seemed paralyzed by the question. She asked the other Japanese people for answers. They answered to the Brazilian. The entire city was destroyed. All these people came from it, he gasped in awe. Xavier flopped her hands up. So what? It just means more sinners will come down here because of the bomb these guys created. Best for us, right? The other nether cities can replicate this power if they capture the right sinners. This bomb of sorts could fall into the wrong hands, I pointed out. The humans stole fire and created a weapon of mass destruction. We know what that has wrought, only pain and thousands of deaths in an instant. Tarksovi shouted at the other sinners. You hear that, you simians? You brought this onto us with your idiotic war. God knows when your Earth will be destroyed with your weapons as well. The American soldiers in the truck shook their heads in shame as the radio suddenly blared out from the front. All sinner retrieval units, return immediately. I repeat, return immediately. Overflow in the city. The engine was fixed, and the black rain suddenly stopped. All that was left was an ominous, fiery haze in the sky. Not from hell, but from that weapon the humans created. We let that Brazilian out on the road as a reward, knowing he'll be picked up by another retriever sometime. But none of that matters. Earth was scarred, and now we have to play cleanup duty for the dead. Ooh, pretty heavy one here, but I felt like this was dealt with well. I like this idea of the repercussions of the atomic bomb being so strong that they're seen in the afterlife and they're damaging the afterlife, and this idea of like mutually assured destruction is even a problem there. But the Great writes, the slaughter beckons, an entry in Rust and Blood. Content warning, war, brutality, language, gore, death, and even more than yesterday's, this guy gets absolutely brutalized by a cultist of Ragash. The proper entry begins now. The smell of gunpowder, the reek of blood, the sound of terror, like the sweetest sustenance to the Rock's ears. The charge had gone well. Caldatham's trenches were strong, but they were new. Rock's kindred had done well. They stormed ahead of him, soaking up all the bullets for him while he slowly advanced. Die, cultist scum! An unenlightened said, screaming from down the trench. He pulled the trigger on his shotgun and sprayed Amrak with his buckshot, but Ragash granted him resilience for such things. The cultist turned his bulk to the man and raised his machine gun. A stream of miasma-strewn lead poured from Amrak's weapon like water from a tap. There was a cloud of smoke from the muzzle flash, the light of day reflecting off the smog and blinding Amrak temporarily, but as it cleared, the unbeliever was nothing but gore on the ground. Sveth Dolad, Ragash, Amrak muttered. This weapon was effective, true, but it took all the fun out of it. He yearned to get his hands dirty the old-fashioned way, before his new sex arch-cultist had taken the previous spot. My lord, his attendant spoke up. Worm, I told you to stop calling me that. We are kindred. We are equal under Ragash's blessed rule. Amrak retorted. His attendant, the one who reloaded his gun and carried his munitions, was a new blood. He had only been inducted a few weeks ago during the last push and was still getting used to the culture. Right you are, brother. Would you like me to reload your bloodstorm? The worm asked meekly. Not yet. I only fired it for a moment. Amrak continued his way down the trench, following the zigzagging pattern he so despised to the east, hoping to break their defenses that had stopped their last charge the other week. These trenches had only gotten more and more boresome to capture as time went on. Amrak was a true-blooded Seftor. He had seen this entire war, all 63 years of it. Though the Caldathans were doomed, they did their best to make it take as long as possible. Amrak had lost count of how many times he'd stormed one of these insufferable things. Had he mentioned that already? How much he hated these damned trenches. What about the others? His attendant asked. What about them? Amrak said coldly. They will rise as all things do, all things except that which disappoints Ragash. That's true? I always thought it was a myth. Even ashes? The worm asked. Amrak turned to him, and though his helm was covering it, the weakling felt his menacing grin from beneath the visor. Amrak placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and leaned in close.
Even ashes will rise. You would do best to learn that phrase, for we call upon it as truth.
Boring. This was boring. Only a handful of Caldathans were left in this trench segment. They had all retreated the moment Emrak's company made a successful charge. But then he heard something. A deep voice beyond the corner.
You sure there's a purple fella coming, boss? We've been waiting for a few minutes and nothing showed up yet.
The voice of a biggin bounced down the trench line. Yes, now be quiet or else they might hear you, a smaller voice yelled quietly. Emrak turned to look at his attendant and motioned for him to stay put. He started walking forward, deliberately stomping in the mud.
Even ashes will rise, faith dullard Ragash Caldathan.
Emrak stomped quicker. He saw a brief glimpse of a man's face peek around the corner. Perfect, he thought. Emrak let out a roar of anger as he pulled the trigger. The scream of his weapon deafened the cultist. He held the trigger down for eons, it felt like, a constant stream of bullets as the barrel of his bloodstorm went red with bloodlust. The wooden supports of the trench were shredded into thin strips of timber as he continued forward.
Machine gunner! Machine gunner requesting support in trench section!
Good. Reinforcements. Emrak couldn't help but smile. Each step he took, his zealous fury grew in strength, eventually causing miasma to drip from beneath his armor like blood.
Bring me your soldiers, Caldathan. I am ravenous for the slaughter.
Emrak shouted. My lord, my brother, your belt, it's almost... Click, click, click. Out. The attendant looked on with horror as Emrak's gun ran dry. Emrak turned back to look at him. Oops, the gunner said innocently. Emrak slammed the gun down into the mud and racked his shoulders, speeding his steps to the two soldiers. They seemed to notice quickly that Emrak had run dry. As they jumped from around the corner, a small officer and a biggin, just as he had hoped. The smaller man dumped the magazine of pistol rounds into Emrak's helmet, but the angles and sturdy make of soul steel redirected their trajectory. The biggin, though, had made the choice to charge Emrak with a raised truncheon. Good. Emrak braced himself. He left his torso wide open for the giant to strike, but dug his feet into the mud of the trench. He looked up in awe as the biggin made a swing. It looked as if the creature swung with such force the wooden club was bending mid-air. Then he felt the impact. A solid, weighted feeling in his gut. The pressure of the blow the only discomfort he felt. Emrak returned in kind, bailing his fist and raising up his arm to meet the biggin's chin. A loud crack echoed in the trench as the biggin stumbled backwards. Emrak wiped the blood from his visor as he took a good look at the damage he had done. The giant stood dumbfounded. His jaw was obliterated, his nose mangled, and his cheekbones decimated. One of his eyes was crushed inwards by the impact, and the other squeezed from its socket and dangled from the hole by the nerves. The huge man started wildly flailing with his club as his companion tried again and again to usher him to withdraw, but Emrak wouldn't let that happen. Emrak took a quick leap forwards, ducking under one of the beast's wild haymakers before jumping up into the air by several feet. He pushed up against the biggin's collarbone, now half a normal man's height above the giant. Emrak combined his hands together into a ball and brought them down onto his head. The biggin crumpled to the ground as his head fell into his lungs, flattened against his previous neckline. The officer let out a curse and started to run off. Emrak let out a soft chuckle before grabbing the biggin's truncheon. He lined up the shaft with the officer's legs. With a scream, the man fell face first into the mud. He turned back, unloading more bullets into Emrak's gut plate. This time the rounds found their mark, piercing through the plate and penetrating Emrak's guts with a gentle warmth.
I Zvasnaga for the Pain Lord.
Emrak menacingly walked towards the officer, chanting over and over again in the suffer tongue of Ragash.
Royals, protect me! Help! Somebody help me!
Emrak laughed, a big belly laugh that shook the ground. He stepped on the man's ankle as he tried to crawl away, causing him to wince in pain and anticipation for his death. Emrak flipped him over with his foot, staring at him for a few moments as he pondered a creative way to commemorate his victory.
Please, please have mercy. I'm the son of a noble. I can be used as barter.
No. The man's face twisted in horror. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he grimaced against the pain and tried to push down his fear. Emrak saw the strain on his face and came to a profound realization of how he would give tribute to Ragash with this victim. He took off his helmet, his lacerated, bleeding face and purple skin now visible to all. He set it down gingerly in the mud before rubbing his hands together while studying the man's abdomen. Eventually, after several agonizing seconds, Emrak dug his hands into the officer's guts. He screamed out in agony as Amrak placed one hand under his ribcage and the other wrapped around his pelvis. With a heave, he lifted the man up into the air. The man choked on blood as he cried out, the force of his shouts popping the veins in his eyes, leaving them bloodshot. Then, with slow deliberation, Amrak drew his hands apart. The Caldathan grunted quietly as his breath left his lungs. Snapping, popping, breaking noises blessed Amrak's ears. Blood spilled out onto the cultist's face, pouring into the seams of his armor. For a moment, Amrak saw backwards into the past, visions of the malicious paradise, his family, his community. But it passed, as it always did. With a final push, Amrak split the man in twain. The officer took in another deep breath, pushing what few organs were still in the upper torso out from their hiding places. He tried his best to scream again, but only vomited out blood as he felt around his ribs, looking for what Amrak had taken from him. His eyes darted around, looking for something, eventually landing on his radio, shattered when he dropped after Amrak broke his legs. Finally, he looked up to his killer, his blank eyes barely holding life as he mouthed a curse to Amrak. Shouting voices drew closer, beginning to round the next zag, or zig. Amrak leant down to pick up his helm. Placing it back on his head, he began to imagine the carnage he would reap on those who dared approach him. "My brother," Amrak turned to see his attendant holding a new reloaded bloodstorm. Amrak sighed, disappointedly, swiping his weapon from the serf's hands. "This is going to be boring," Amrak thought to himself. This might be the most brutal description we've ever had, so if this stays in, I think this may end up being the line. If you go a little bit too past the slaughter beckons, then maybe we don't put it in the video, but very well written as always by Predwin, and my voice was getting a sore by the time I got here, so voice acting probably not quite as good, I'm going to be the first to admit, but still enjoyed reading this. Nugget writes, The Industrial Revolution, an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. I grew up in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Greatest time to live, if you ask me. So many new technologies and factories making life easier and cheaper. What's not to love? And technology just keeps evolving. Progress doesn't stop. I invented the light bulb. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. But even just after my time, we saw telephones, internal combustion engines, automobiles. We have more coal for more machines. Truly, there is no better time to be alive. The following decades brought radio, flight, vaccines, faster, more connected trains to connect the world even faster, to exchange ideas and thoughts, sparking even more innovation, sparking nuclear energy, bombs so powerful they can level cities, and a power source that even the gods would be envious of. Moving pictures, television, man has found ways to join the gods amongst the stars and set foot on our shattered moon. All of this within only a century of my time. If I had ever married, my grandchildren would have seen this. Back in my day, we worked by candlelight into the night, and if you suggested flight, we'd say that if man were meant to fly, he'd have been born with wings. Truly, there is no better time to be alive. Computers. Just a few short decades ago, computers took up entire rooms, and now they fit on a desk within pockets. Everyone, everywhere has access to an endless library of everything they would ever want to know right at their fingertips, putting the Library of Alexandria to shame. People can fly around the world in under a day and contact anyone in an instant. The world is more connected than ever, exchanging ideas and thoughts all the more faster, further fueling the exponential growth of inspiration and technology and progress. Truly, there is no better time to be alive. More coal for more machines. They can paint and write and think for themselves now. It's hotter than it was a century ago. It's raining more often. I wonder if one day the world will heat so much that some cities will never see the sun again. Assuming humanity doesn't tear itself and the world apart themselves in a decade, is this the hubris that killed even the gods? Where they chase perfection, man chases progress? More coal for more machines, only now we use oil and nuclear power. Truly there is no better time to be alive. What technology would I say I regret the most? My own. I grew up in the Industrial Revolution, but it never ended. I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to invent something that would outlive me. Would that be the true definition of immortality? Technology keeps progressing, keeps evolving at an exponential rate. At what point will we be unable to keep up? At what point will our world be unable to keep up? Just as the gods tore the world and each other apart, trying to prove themselves better than their creator, man is doing the exact same thing. And so, history repeats itself. Nice. I'm assuming this is from the perspective of Victor, who, seeing so much more time than another mortal, it really gets to grasp the idea of sort of what humans have done to the world in their pursuit of progress. And I think this is a cool little thought experiment here. If not, a bit depressing and close to home. Curio Heart writes, Regretted Technology. Writing by Curio Heart, world building by Auhminous and Curio Heart. The city of Valley Forge has existed for almost longer than anyone can remember. Almost. A small handful of people in Valley Forge recall far more than they let on, including the city's own scintillating socialite of a dragon, Semsa, who makes her presence most known in the city during the evening and overnight hours generally reserved for parties and unwinding. Despite her youthful appearance and apparent nonchalance, Semsa's keen eyes have caught much during her vast time living in Valley Forge, affording her an insight into the city and its machinations matched by few others. Below is a handwritten letter addressed to an individual known only as A, even within Semsa's personal library. The envelope kept with it is undated and unaddressed, as are the other letters preserved from the exchange, leaving questions as to its age and intended recipient. As with everything else in her home, this letter is inaccessible to nearly all residents of Valley Forge. It appears to be part of a broader discussion to help A better understand life in Valley Forge, and Semsa, regarding A's home and kind, shared through a series of letters between the pair. This letter in particular focuses on the city's technology. A. It feels good to be writing again. Thank you for your timely letter. The opportunities to put ink to paper like this are rare anymore, and I appreciate the connection it brings. Do we regret any of our technology? You ask much about this place, especially as of late, and your most recent question is indeed a good one. May you learn much from the mistakes and missteps that have been taken in Valley Forge on the subject. Our relationship with technology here is complicated, to say the least. With it we suffer, without it, few here would survive for long, at least with how things are at present. You see, ours is a civilization built upon technology which demands extraction and creates influence that invariably begins at the top. It has leveled playing fields, improved life, changed landscapes, and redistributed power. It has made communications faster and easier, made information more accessible, and has allowed communications to develop in ways once impossible. And yet, for every good it has offered, it has created at least as many problems. It has oppressed the less fortunate, consolidated wealth and power, and weakened the bonds between people. It is used to surveil and restrict, to destroy and to deceive. The Cedars are evidence enough of this, to my eye. For all the promises of creating a better life in more temperate environments, they instead created more and worse extremes and brought complete control over this region, for both the Avari Cedar Corporation and its investors. The valley this city grew within was originally envisioned to become a temperate paradise. Instead, it became flood-prone in the spring and autumn, a steam bath in summer, and a frozen desert in winter. Artificial intelligence has been no different. After years of promises of the improvements it would make, all the ways it would ease lives, and the freedom it would give the majority, each new development becomes a wedge of division and a tool of oppression. We have corporations that can engineer fully synthetic people, with and without, with their own thoughts, feelings, hopes, dreams, and goals. That could improve the lives of all, and yet it has almost entirely been used to widen divisions and to maintain control. I should know. I've watched for long enough. For me, there is no speculation here, only cold reality, and one that I would expel and replace if only I knew how. Time and again, technology has proven itself as a usurper and consolidator here. Anyone can use it to make anything new, but to make money from it takes investment. It requires having others finance your creation, which in turn exposes it to their influence, inevitably for the worse. And if you refuse investment, you can be assured that it will be completely bought out, buried, or summarily destroyed. It isn't all bad, mind you. I did say there is good that comes with it, too. After all, small pockets of the city have quietly leveraged existing technology to be more beneficial than detrimental, wielding the megacorporations' tools of division for the common good. Sewer City, best known for its stench, squalor, and rampant gang violence, is also home to pockets of people that utilize the city's own surveillance system to help coordinate defenses against gangs. Others have learned ways to reroute or store power and data to give them more stability and control in their lives. The district's western shore, for instance, houses a wolf that has been working hard to make life more hospitable around him by rerouting power from long since unusable buildings to grow food, though I fear his activities may be drawing attention to him as late. I see pockets of other places around the city as well. The Spillways Raven House makes full use of the home's technology to ensure the safety and well-being of their residents and encourages periods of disconnect from it to connect with the people they dwell with. I do wonder if the two that run Raven House have any relation to the wolf I've seen in Sewer City, though. They seem to have similar patterns of activity, even if their methods vary. Ultimately, technology is a necessary evil here, an instrument of control for the wealthy to wield against everyone else while they try to endure. As some creative uses of technology show, however, it can also be leveraged to great benefit, even in places like this. It is at once the black storm cloud that terrifies and the silver lining that offers small glimpses of hope through the darkness. When it comes to technology, we of Valley Forge regret it all. And none of it. This does make me curious, however. How do you keep time there? Times of day are routinely mentioned, but I know little of your broader timekeeping practices. I'd love to know as much as you're able to tell me. Semsa. P.S. Give O and M my regards. I'll make time to visit with you three again soon. I greatly miss our monthly visits over tea, and your blends in particular are a treat I look forward to enjoying again. Interesting. I feel like I have lost my feeling for the world here a little bit in the fact that we have a dragon. Maybe it almost feels like potential world hopper business going on here, and maybe that's why it breaks through a little bit. Either way, cool little in-world letter that we got to read aloud. For day 343, the prompt was, what's an alternative form of adrenaline, bodily overdrive, in your world? And this comes from the Wanderer in the Discord. Carhop writes, cliff spiders, an entry in Restris. Snippet of a conversation between Richter Scalus and a fellow patron overheard in a roadside inn. Think one of those 8-legged, pinky-sized, pinprick bite-leaving spiders is scary? God's bones, you must not get out of this valley much. Out in the gulches and canyons, I'd be glad to run into one of them little bastards. Take that little runt you just squished and make it the size of a wolf, covered in thick fur, and give it paralyzing venom, then come and talk to me about being scared of spiders. The cliff spider is one of Restris' most infamous predators, known for its ambush tactics and trap-laying methodology when hunting. Though different subspecies exhibit different sizes, the smallest, an Edridae anoclo, or the cliff hound, being as small as shepherding dogs, while the largest, an Edridae gigantus, or the giant cliff spider, grow to the size of young dragons, and different colorations and patterns, several factors are consistent throughout the species. The presence of a round, hardened, chitinous growth located at the end of the spider's abdomen is the most notable of these characteristics. Sitting just above the spinnerets, this appendage is used as means of both creating security and serving as the perfect ambush tool. After creating one of their signature vertical corkscrew burrows in a cliff face, the spider will seal the entranceway by walking backwards into its shield first, wedging the growth through the opening. It then molts out of its final juvenile exoskeleton, which dissolves due to the expression of a unique hormone produced only at this time by the spider's web glands, leaving the shield behind to harden to a stone-like quality. The adult cliff spider, sporting a larger and often grandiose shield, is then able to freely enter and exit its burrow in search of mates and opportunities for territorial expansion through other hidden entrances. Most of the spider's day, however, is spent lying in wait for prey near its shield door. The cliff spider hides its shield door by covering it with foliage and scattering dust and debris around it before then spinning a series of tripwires around and through the door itself so the spider can detect when prey passes by. Once a creature stumbles across one of these silken wires, the spider jumps out to subdue its prey with shocking speed, injecting its paralyzing venom into its catch and returning to its burrow to slowly, methodically devour its meal. The secondary characteristic of the cliff spider which stands out is its fast-acting paralytic venom, capable of running its course through a young Rasselbaum worm in a matter of minutes. The venom has come to be feared and sought after by many adventurers, mystics, and herbalists. None, however, can match the Cori in regard to versatility of use. The cliff elves use the venom to coat spears and arrow tips, creating terrible poisons, and as a hallucinogenic drug called Gorgon's blood in trade slang. Cori witches and alchemists famously created a potion from the venom during the First War, which put their warriors into a fevered state when ingested, allowing them to bypass psychophysiological barriers much like the uniquely human magic known as adrenaline, innate to each member of that strange species. Though the venom is powerful in its unaltered state, stories persist of mighty heroes and great beasts resisting its stone-like hold. It is of little wonder why Restris' largest mercenary company has taken the creature to be its moniker and mascot. Most experienced trailblazers know that if they do not keep an eye to the ground, watching carefully for the glint of light against silk whilst traversing the mountain sides of Restris, even the most battle-hardened and hardy among them are likely to become a cliff spider's next meal. The most ferocious predators seemingly avoid scaling cliff faces, almost instinctually aware of the dangers that lurk there. Woe be to you, traveler, should you forget to bring a torch to light your path along the winding mountain slopes. Pray the spider's mandibles crush your skull first, or experience 3 lifetimes of pain throughout the last hours of your life. This feels more like an excuse to talk about the spiders, but we are all about excuses in Build Together. Whatever the prompt gets you to write is better than nothing, and I like this. I mean, Venom's being turned into potions or into tinctures and stuff is a big, like, fun fascination of mine. I have a few of these as well, and great anatomy coverage on these giant cliff spiders. The Wanderer writes, Divine Pulse. Feats. Impossible ones, running faster than is possible, lifting great weights, and dodging arrows at near point-blank range. Powerful heroes and demigods near can all pull feats as such. Often it's overlooked by nature of them being legendary. Of course, a legend is powerful, but it is a feat that can be learned by anyone, albeit with great difficulty. It requires time, dedication, and determination to do the impossible. That is what it requires. This is what a divine pulse is, the impossible made possible. It's a purely and truly logistical standpoint. It is not a difficult thing to understand. To those who have a spark or greater of divinity, or have trained their skills through years of training, danger will trigger a divine pulse. These pulses will slow down time around them, heightens their senses, strengthens their body, and triggers their bodily adrenaline. It slowly saps their mana, but will remain so long as they're alive, or until they consciously end it. There is an even more extreme version of this, often called a perpetual pulse, which we'll cover more later. To delve a little deeper, a divine pulse is triggered by danger. There is no exact science behind it, except that it triggers before death is inevitable. That varies drastically. It also does not trigger for any non-physical threats, and only to those that are deadly. Cases have been known for these where there was any chance for the person to have knowledge of their danger. This is where calling it divine came about, because it was believed to be fate itself that awoke them. However, a divine pulse can be trained into anyone, good, evil, or anything in between. The jolt of a divine pulse will wake them up into full alertness and clarity. Grogginess will not be present. It will not indicate what the danger is, but will instead form a strong sense of danger. This can be traumatizing if not desensitized. The physical effect of a divine pulse is strong. Firstly, pain does not register, nor does exhaustion. While under its effects, physically they will feel at their peak, feel energy, no pain, and strong clarity. Their senses will reach nearly 10 times their normal amount. Unfortunately, this can lead to thrill seekers trying to sustain it. Another effect is that time will slow around them. Depending on the size of their mana reserve, this effect can range from none at all to nearly stopped. The physical strength and speed of the user also increases depending on their capacity to use it. Another aspect of a divine pulse is that the pulse can force the body to survive until the soul is totally removed from the body. This can lead to the body being dead, while the person is still acting, making an ultimate, I'm not surviving, but neither are you. While a divine pulse is usually related to combat, it can be applied to any threat, whether it be poison, illness, a dangerous landscape, or any manner of danger. The ability to regulate how strong it is can be learned. Further, while it requires decades of training, one can make a very subtle but constant divine pulse, so long as their mana regeneration is larger than the taxing of their divine pulse. This is, however, a very taxing feat, and only very competent warriors with arcane prowess try and learn it. That is called a perpetual pulse. A divine pulse can be triggered on top of an existing perpetual pulse. With all of this, both the divine pulse and the perpetual pulse has led to already renowned figures becoming even more mythic. When you see someone react to a danger before it even presents itself, time and time again, it elevates them to a higher level. I would have liked to know, and maybe we will learn this someday later, but how one goes about training something like this. Oh, we know you've got a sort of typical mana system going on in Endron, but I'm curious about how do individuals train sort of mana capacity and mana regeneration and output and all these things. Very, very JRPG sounding or anime-esque or isekai coded kind of here, but I'm always fond of knowing how does someone get better at this thing in this world. For day 344, the prompt was, what is the most reproduced piece of literature in your world? And this comes from ScrubsyBoy844 in the Discord. Kendamarania writes, Pulp Fiction, an entry in City of Woe. I ain't through with you, sinner, by a damn sight. I'm gonna get medieval on your ass. Mr. Mephisto, Pulp Superhero. Approximately 80% of Hell is illiterate as of 1943, with over 2/3 of them being able to read at a 6th grade level. However, much of the illiterate population does not read religious texts or even high literature, but instead cheap, mass-produced novels known in the present as pulp magazines, named as such due to the wood pulp material used to print on. These low-brow magazines often featured sensationalist, violent, and vulgar short stories of a variety of imagined settings separate from hell, sometimes taking place on Earth or heaven. Different publishers would specialize in certain subgenres, including adventure, fantasy, science fiction, and horror/weird. Certain nether cities also have local genres that are popular with its readers, such as Corpi having stories pertaining to biblical epics, Northerns, Hell's equivalent to the Western genre, and superhero stories. Although they do not tend to have overarching themes and instead relying on pure shock value, there have been some noticeable motifs and tropes within these pulp magazines. For instance, many fantasy and sci-fi pulps feature far happier and brighter worlds than the reality of hell, hoping to give their readers a window of escapism. Meanwhile, superhero pulps, such as the popular Carpesian trickster hero Mephisto, contain anti-human sentiments and have been used as propaganda pieces during wartime. Horror and weird tales often have angels as cosmically terrifying entities. Additionally, crime pulps, including ones that feature hard-boiled detectives and gangsters, tend to sell extremely poorly, especially in crime-ridden cities where such stories are extremely common in reality. I like the leaning into 1940s sort of era, but with all these fascinating sort of fantastical twists, because your setting is hell and the city of woe. Carhop writes, Tablets of Ordered Primacy, an entry in Restris. The Tablets of Ordered Primacy are both cultural code and religious text to many of the dwarves who still abide by the old ways. Even those dwarves who have left the crags and fissures of their forefathers often regard the tablets with immense respect and attribute great historical significance to them, as the tablets are said to have been written and passed down by the Celebren before their moonfall-wrought doom. The tablets outline the ways in which the Kragench may best prosper through cultural customs, religious rites, and runes of power said to be parts of Kryptis' being. Rituals derived from these runes are responsible for the Totenek and other rites known only to the highest order of the priests within the faith of the living catacombs. Being written in the dead language of the Celebren, many scholars believe that the tablets can only be read by one who has been granted the knowledge by Kryptis. This has led to some mistrust about their contents, but nonetheless secures the secrets of the faith from outsiders. While the original tablets are scarce and can only be found within the sacred catacombs of each community, a section of the tablets exists in every faithful dwarven home. These small stone tablets, hand-carved by the founding heads of the house and placed at the base of their family shrine, outline the systemic rituals the Kragench are to enact in years according to a rhythm of prime numbers. For example, every 2 years, the home's tablets are to be refreshed with new etchings and coats of rune-blessed oils. Every 3 years, each house begins carving a new member. Every 5th year, the houses name and animate their new members. Every 7th year, the youngest of each house is sent to journey in search of enlightenment and prosperity. On the 11th year, every sojourning dwarf is to join a new house. Every 97th year, the house heads are laid to rest and their soul metal is shaped into a crest for the next to wear. The cycle of these rituals is endless and requires the Kragench to dig deeper, farther, and more recklessly through their subterranean homes in search of new deposits of ore, gems, and stone needed to fuel them. In recent decades, many young dwarves have refused to return from their sojourn. They cite an unwillingness to contribute to a looming resource war, with many joining mercenary companies or continuing in their ancient tradition of cohabitating with humanity. A sizable settlement of surface dwarves has been established on the southeastern end of the Orowasho territory, its political and religious leadership hoping to guide their community into a new way of reclamation rather than consumption. Some religious outcasts claim that the tablets in their cycle are not the words of Kryptis at all, but instead a grand conspiracy laid by the Celebren to unknown ends. One heretic dwarf in particular, a young sojourner known simply as Sulphur, has begun to amass a cult following that largely opposes the faith of the living catacombs. He claims to have bathed in the hearts of Kryptis and professes that he was given a look into the Pavon's mind through a dream when he fell asleep in that volcano's caldera. He seeks the mountain where the iron wrought was forged, for it is there that he believes he will find clues towards the secret of his people's forebears. Hopefully I got all the pronunciations right. I think the only one I was a little concerned about was Celebren. Maybe I was supposed to say Celebren. I don't know 100% there, but Carhop will let me know if I'm wrong. I like this sort of life cycle of the dwarves. I remember you had dwarves as effectively just like constructed stone beings, so they create each other, it sounds like. And it sounds like this ended up becoming a bit of an exponential growth problem, and that is why there's this sort of like resource-hungry society that they're attempting to maintain because of sort of the religious importance of the tablets. Okay. Nugget writes, Arthurian legend, an entry in Time Traveler, and the Immortal. Emrys, what's this? Victor asked, holding up a sword he had found among Emrys's belongings. It seemed no matter how long the two lived together, there was always something that surprised him. It was a very nice sword, although Victor wasn't confident enough in his knowledge on Anglo-Saxon weapons to tell how nice it was. What he did know was that Emrys used daggers. Why would he have a mortal sword? Oh, that's Caliburn, Emrys said casually, looking up to see what Victor was holding. Caliburn? Isn't that the old name for Excalibur? Very same, yes. You just casually have Excalibur. Of course I do. It was thrown in a lake after Arthur died, but I enchanted it. I figured I should have it. So King Arthur, he was real? You knew him? Yes. I feel like you would have been written about. Really? Emrys's brow furrowed as he processed the idea of human literature not caring about him. I suppose I changed my name a lot around then, with magic becoming outlawed and all. Was there any Aurelius Ambrosius? Not that I know of. All right, give me a second. I think I went by Marcus at some point. Marcus? Yeah, Marcus. Marcus Aurelius? Sounds about right. Well, now I have more questions. One thing at a time. King Arthur. Right. I think the main other name I went by at the time was Murden Emrys. Murden, Victor repeated. You were Merlin? Well, actually, I was King Arthur. I was Merlin. Victor sat down, trying to process what he was hearing. You are Merlin. The lack of response to that sentence is all I need to know that you're actually surprised about this. All right. Emrys adjusted his posture to lean forward as he continued to talk. Yes, I was Merlin. Yes, King Arthur was a real person. I'm not particularly well read on most literature regarding him, but I know he had his knights. There was a lot of magic in his legends. Is that also rooted in reality? I'd say so. Magic was becoming illegal, but the gods were still bleeding everywhere. I know Gawain talked about a Green Knight at some point who almost cut his head off. There was the Holy Grail, but I wasn't there for that. Oh, if we want to talk about people using magic back then, there was, of course, Morgan. Emrys said Morgan's name with an air of bitterness. Morgan the Fae, Victor asked. What did she do to you? I thought it was mostly Guinevere she didn't like. She turned me into a tree, that's what she did. You ever wonder why I wasn't at Camland? That's why. That's where I was when Arthur died. He paused as he collected himself. Gwen was a sweetheart. I liked Gwen. Didn't she cheat on Arthur? Not that I recall. Yeah, she did, with Lancelot. Who is Lancelot? Lancelot? Lancelot du Lac. Do you not know him? Well, he sounds French, so I already don't like him, but no, I don't think I've ever met anyone named Lancelot. He's Arthur's most famous knight. He's described as the greatest knight in the war. Someone made him up, didn't they? Most likely. Victor sulked for a moment, tracing the blade of the legendary sword with his thumb. Despite his opinions on magic, he was always fond of Arthurian legend. He eventually smirked and looked back up at Emrys. Turned into a tree, huh? Emrys sighed. Don't even get me started. So it's interesting to watch Nugget sort of play with the historical myth and legend through the eyes of Victor, who's, tries to appear well-read, and then Emrys, who just knows the truth of things. But also, Emrys is not a reliable narrator, which I like, which I know is something that Nugget plays with a lot, because Emrys doesn't remember certain things. So Emrys could say all kinds of things about the truth of the Arthurian legend, and how much of that is really true, we don't actually know. For day 345, the prompt was, what does timekeeping look like in your world? And this prompt comes from ScrubsyBoy844 in the Discord. Vexwyn writes, The calendars. In Ka Lume, a year cycle is 126 days or 18 weeks. The world has two calendars, one for the people in the light zone and one for those in the dark zone. The light zone. Bathed in eternal daylight, the people of the desert watch the solar cycles. As the planet has a strong elliptical orbit, the sun draws closer and pulls away at different times throughout the year. The year is divided by high sun season occurs when the planet reaches its closest point to the sun. In the desert, the heat becomes unbearable. The sun appears larger in the sky and temperatures soar above 80 degrees Celsius. People retreat to caves to hibernate and escape the scorching conditions. Meanwhile, in the twilight zone, the sun rises higher on the horizon, aurora storms grow more frequent, and the weather turns pleasant and warm. Here they experience it as summer, their dry season. Fortunately, this intense season lasts only 4 weeks. Sun waning and sun crescent are transition periods between the high and low seasons. Each lasts 3 weeks. Temperatures gradually fall or rise. Low sun season occurs when the planet is farthest from its sun. For about 8 weeks, desert temperatures become bearable, around 45 degrees C. The sun appears smaller in the sky. In the twilight zone, the weather cools and the rainy season begins. The dark zone. Shrouded in endless night, the people of the dark side are blessed with a starry sky. In parts of the twilight zone, stars become visible during the low sun season, so the people of the crepuscular band use both calendars. Each week is ruled by a constellation that passes overhead as the planet orbits, 18 in total. The dragon's tail, the flame bearer, the spiral, the thorn raptor, the 3 dots, the bow, the golden circlet, the iron beetle, the broken crown, the great axe, the huntsman, the fang, the flying serpent, the light horn, this is a comet, the stalking lynx, the spear, the twin-tailed scorpion, and the hammer. Time is counted in days and weeks, not months. Examples. On the 6th day of the dragon's tail week under the aurora of high sun, the decree was given. She was born on the 3rd day of the hammer's week. We have a couple of really thorough entries coming up in this one, and this is one of them from Vexwyn. I am really curious how much of a distance increase you would require to actually get a tidally locked planet's sun-facing side to cool down. I don't know enough about this stuff. Maybe I'll have to go look into this. I'm really curious about the science behind this because it seems like you've looked into it really well. Maybe you can give us some of the math that, to be completely fair, I might not understand. Kendamarania writes, nonsense timekeeping, an entry in Return to Feylund. Time is relative in Feylund, subjective and constantly dilating with the magic around the realm. A quick stroll through the ivy woods might take only an hour for one person, while it takes 7 days for another person taking the exact same route. The age of a person also fluctuates greatly, making it difficult for the various fairies to tell what was objective time. Still, there are a few attempts to make sense of the nonsensical realm. One such attempt is known as a tide clock, a wind-up clock invented and sold by the goblins as a commodity in their traveling markets. As the name suggests, they measure a full day using the high and low tides, since they are determined by the sister moons, the few constants in the realm that has a set path and calendar while traveling across the sky. They begin the day with the morning tide, and then alerts the reader with a terrible sound when it reaches the midday tide, and then again when it's night. It's highly inaccurate, and at times illogical, but it's logical amongst goblins who need it for their night markets. Another common method is using songs and poetry to denote smaller increments of time, such as seconds and minutes. Below is one such example of a rhyme used to denote 10 seconds. I am hither, I am thither, below me is a witch that withers. Gone are her teeth, and rotted with silver, for she hoards and eats her own grown liver. Rhyming measurements are frequently used by the talking animal trams for scheduling purposes when traveling across the realm. They were also adopted in use by the elves, at least the ones who were less alien and thought of mortal concerns such as time. I think we have got one other entry in Feylund before that was maybe not marked, and I had not marked it, but I like this very almost fairy tale, childlike, fantastical idea of a setting we're getting so far, and maybe my gauge is a little off, but we'll see as we discover more of it. Nugget writes, Odd Sense of Time, an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. 3 minutes, 14 seconds. Victor opened his eyes, looking across at Emrys, who was looking up at him with a look of disbelief. How are you doing that? Emrys asked. Doing what? Your sense of time, it's uncanny. And you noticed that? You show up on time to the second, perfectly planned. You can mentally keep track of time to a fraction of that, I'd say. Not a single one of your clocks is set to the right time, but at this point, I don't even question why, because you just know what time it is off the top of your head anyway. I can't put my finger on it, it just feels too perfect to be normal. Emrys Aurelius, implying there's such a thing as too perfect. Victor smiled dryly. Never thought I'd see the day. Are you listening for something? Are you counting your heartbeats? When you track time, what is this? Victor laughed. That would have been 257 beats during that last test. Not that I was counting that, no. But you have the number off the top of your head. No, a pulse is far too inconsistent to track time with, but its current rate of 78 beats per minute, yeah. And is that exact? Yes. Emrys paused before asking his next question. How long have you been like this? He asked, slowly. Oh, slowly. Frickin' goblet of fire moment. How long have you been like this? He asked, slowly. As long as I can remember. As long as you can remember. As long as I can remember, it's not even something I notice, really. It's just this innate sense, I suppose. I don't know how better to articulate it. Can you try to articulate it? I can try. Victor took a slow breath as he tried to gather his words. It's like I can feel time. That isn't right either. It isn't something I hear or see. It's part of me. Feeling the very fiber of time is as natural to me as breathing. I hear its voice in the ticking of clocks. My head feels empty without it. A clock set to the wrong time is not broken, just displaced beyond the understanding of its peers. It's beautiful, time. I've been obsessed with it for as long as I can remember, wanting to learn all I can about it, how it works, how it bends. Victor opened his eyes again. He wasn't even sure when he had closed them. Well, there you go. I tried, and now you think I'm mad. Not mad, but there's definitely something about you. I know, you're far from the first to describe me as such, but please, no more questions. I assure you, I don't know much more than you observe about my freaky habits. If you insist. So, Emrys does not know Victor's connection to time as the deity, which I find fascinating, and I don't think we've got a picture that far in the future where this would be discovered, but I'm sure that this is intended story tension, the idea that Victor, I believe Victor probably learns this before Emrys, I assume, and then there would be something interesting going on there, but maybe we have got a picture of the time during that sort of equivalent understanding between them. I don't know. We've got a lot of writing from Nugget at this point, like probably several hours of writing just of Nugget by now, so who knows? XP Sharp Razor writes, Australica timekeeping. Now, this is one of the most unique entries we've got in a while because I will just be reading from a web page. Now, for listeners, there might be a lot of things that you're not going to get as easily because there is a lot of imagery here. XR Sharprazor has put a lot of effort into this system, which I encourage you to check out the YouTube for this part alone, at the very least, if you want to see the cool visuals that they've come up with. Taxi, ta, time. What time is it? These words/phrases will be used when describing a time or a duration, which is useful when it comes to time telling. They fall under the taxi type. Word structure. A single word that falls under the taxi type will have a structure like above. Not every slot will be present, but it takes the structure above as the grammatic template. In this page, we will be diving into these slots. The slots are effectively a moment/duration, followed by a predefined/standard. Then you have, I believe, any number of time segment slots after that. And the format will be the taxi in brackets, then a greater than symbol, then ta in brackets, colon, and then the time segments. Moment versus duration. When we look at 03:45:16, do we mean 3 hours, 45 minutes, and 16 seconds, or 3 in the morning, past 45 minutes and 16 seconds? In this case, we need to specify if we are referring to a moment, a position of time, or a quantity of time, duration. Examples: 3 o'clock is a moment, 3 hours is a duration. In the taxi system, a position in time is taxi, a moment is caxi, or ta and ka. The quantification of time is taxi, and the duration of time is clari, or cla. Predefined versus standard. There are two types of time units, those that are only usable at a certain location and may vary from planet to planet, predefined. Those that are not easy to use but same across the universe, used for scientific researches or traveling, standard. Based on the situation, we can choose whether we want to timekeeping with predefined context or go full blast accurate. If we go for standard units, we can ignore this slot. If we go predefined units, we need to specify the location and thus declaring the allowed set of units. To specify the current planet or predefinitions, this slot will be seva or kosra to represent information given, caxi to represent location specification, the location name, the name of the location, or if the location has a predefined symbol, which also fits. This is also helpful when specifying time when we are dealing with different time zones. Okay, just normal stuff, no space travel or anything wonky. In this case, the current location can be caxi ko. So the current location slot can be ko, then the location segment will be sveka ko. Time segments list. Just like in normal time telling, a clock can be divided into different parts: year, month, day, hour, minutes, seconds, etc. Here we have a slightly different mechanism, time segment accumulation, having a list of time segments such that each time segment contains a specific value. This also means that a taxi word can have some of the time segments omitted or appended. In this case, the time segment will act differently based on if we have chosen to go with predefined context or went with standard time telling, timekeeping based on a predefined context. These units are based on the periodic pattern on a planet, like a complete orbit or a complete rotation, anything periodic that can be observed. These units are defined by the citizens, scientists, or representations of the people, like institutes or organizations. Now there are a series of glyphs here denoting a year, a day, and a minute. Glyph derivation. The minute symbol is derived from the taxi symbol. Since a minute is a short moment, it can be interpreted as a short moment is worth a half hourglass, since the taxi symbol is derived from an hourglass. The year symbol is derived from a planet's full orbit, where the dash is the planet. The day symbol is derived from a planet's full single rotation, where the little dot is the planet. An Earth year may not be equal to another planet's year. It is by default that when the planet is not specified, we are referring to the current planet that we are on. In most cases, for now, we are on Earth, so by default, ta, kla, ra means an Earth year. This also means that different planets and societies may divide a year into multiple parts to represent months, i.e., the denominator may differ for everyone. In this case, the time segment will look like this. Whole quantity, a number is written in prime factor script to describe how many whole unit. Unit specification can be a year, a month, a day, an hour, a minute, or a second, etc. This changes based on the planets. Fragment quantity, a number is written in prime factor script to describe how many predefined pieces of the unit. Predefined pieces. Take what we are familiar with as an example. On Earth, 1 year can be divided into 12 months. This division is arbitrary but conventional. Therefore, both Earth year and Earth month share the same unit. It is just when specifying years, we will use the whole quantity slot, and when specifying months, we will use the fragment quantity. Examples. It is predefined that on Earth, a month is 12th of a year, an hour is a 24th of a day, a second is a 60th of a minute. There is a series of glyphs here sort of denoting this information. I'm not 100% sure how to actually read this out in a way that will be very clear to a listener, so I encourage you to come and look at the picture. If you want to see this stuff as well without going to the YouTube, its website is also just posted by XR Sharp Razor in the Discord. Warning, sometimes a planet's day is longer than a planet's year. It is not always that a planet's year is longer than a planet's day. Timekeeping based on a standard system. Here we will use something universal as our standard reference. According to Wikipedia, the frequency of the electron spin flip for a hydrogen atom in its ground state is approximately 142040575.1.768 Hertz. This means that each oscillation takes approximately 1 second per 142040575.1.768 equals 7.0402418376248142 times 10 to the negative 10 seconds. A conasecond is the duration for 2 to the 32nd oscillations, which is approximately 3.0237608448529519 seconds. We have several glyphs here: conaseconds, conaminutes, kona hours, and kona days. Note, Kosra no Na will be covered in the Kosra no chapter. A kona minute is 64 kona seconds. A kona hour is 64 kona minutes. A kona day is 64 kona hours. Here are the kona time unit and normal human time unit comparisons. 1 kona second is the roughly 3 seconds we saw before. 1 kona minute is 193.52 seconds, or roughly 3 minutes and 13.5 seconds. 1 kona hour is close to 3 hours, 26 minutes, and 25.32 seconds. A kona day is roughly 9 days, 4 hours, and 11 minutes, 0.76 seconds. This, of course, all being Earth time. The inspiration of kona seconds. The atomic time unit, taxicla krona, is inspired by the time unit used in the Golden Record on the Voyager. In this case, the time segment becomes something like a nominator, a number to describe how many pieces of the broken pieces of the unit. Unit specification can be a year, a month, a day, an hour, a minute, or a second, etc. Denominator, a number to describe how many pieces the unit should be broken into. Isn't this just a fraction? In some senses, yes. Basically, one way to understand the value of a time segment can be thought of as a time unit multiplied by a nominator divided by a denominator. The way to pronounce it is time unit, nominator, ru, denominator. Here, ru acts as the divider. This will be referred in a future chapter, Kosra no matter. Preposition of time. Before, now, future. These are provided when things are happening or happened in Australica. Since these words have a taste or direction, the marker is used on the Caxi symbol. Now, I hope I did an okay job, Sharp Razor, of getting this across just verbally. It's a bit tough, as this has very clearly been formatted in a way to be visually consumed, but I did my best. I do recommend people go check this out. It's very thorough. The glyph system seems very cool and very interesting. You've got this whole Khan language set up, it looks like, for the way that the time is kept in this universe that you're creating, and it's honestly really fascinating. It's so much work put into this, and I very much appreciate that you shared this with us, and I recommend everyone go check it out. For day 346, the prompt was, how do outsiders view a faction of your world? Probin the Great writes, afraid of prophets, an entry in What Lies West. From the deepest recesses of the West to the most decorated of mesas in Harush, people will always have their opinions. But two groups of people, the catfolk and ratfolk, are almost constantly under pressure from travelers, poets, and scholars for their alien societies. Both humans and elves have societies built around industry, farming, and more importantly, their nobles. Nobles are important, according to these people. They guide those beneath them to build a better world, a world that just so happens to have the nobles at the top. As of late, with the power gap after the Org Revolution, many noble families have been buying up land, farms, riversides, and other agricultural acres to secure their fortunes. At the same time, this massive movement from dozens of noble families has left many peasants and other lower-class folk with nowhere to retire. Nobles in Koros have bought up so much land that only 1/20th of the farmable land in Koros is owned by the common man. On the opposite, the lower classes of Harush and the Mariki are living better than some nobles, for their societies run off a so-called perfect communism, though a Koros noble would never call it perfect. Ratfolk society is built around usefulness, so while not every single citizen is treated equally, they remain heavily encouraged to look for their friends and family. Catfolk society is built around their community, their oneness in the arid environments of Harush. Both of these peoples have been encouraged by their environment, or religions, or both, to look after one another and ensure that everyone does their part. Ratfolk merchants and catfolk chefs are both as renowned in their hometowns as pottery makers or a painter. Everyone knows everyone else in their cities, both because having friends in their world is important and because the way they settle areas leads to a lower density of individuals. A human noble may oversee hundreds of workers and only know a handful of their names, while a ratfolk overseer might have half that number, but they know each of them personally. An elven lord might tithe thousands in taxes every year and brew discord in their citizens, while a catfolk noble doesn't even know what the word tax means. The elves and humans are so opinionated on these two other lineages because it seems that they are afraid of making money, when it's their society's reliance on community that pushes them to not exploit their fellows. The Corosian treatment of their workers has gotten so unbelievably horrid that it seems humans and elves are doomed for an economic crash in the coming years, with their citizens either going west to find opportunities or immigrating to Harush and Mariki to earn a proper living. Man, dude, late-stage capitalism pushed everybody west. I get it. Kendamarania writes, School Dialogue, Anti-Humanism in Corpi, an entry in City of Woe. Heads up for some vulgar teenage humor ahead. Mr. Helos. Quiet everyone. Damn kids. I thought you all let your energy out at lunch. Alright, today's agenda will be introducing our next unit with human literature, picking up our copies of Don Quixote from the library before the bell rings. Callie. Pfft. Why the hell do we even need to learn all this crap anyways? Aren't we supposed to be torturing the guys we're reading about? Mr. Helos. Oh, shut it, will you? You're supposed to be getting out your notebooks, besides, as part of the curriculum. Parsnell. But it's a good question, isn't it? Why not? We just read something from our realm, one that we can apply to our own lives. Zyro. It's a good learning opportunity to read different perspectives on the world both us and humans share. After all, we still feel the same emotions and go through similar experiences. Callie. And look at how well that came out to them. War, famine, pollution, unnatural death. I think it's pretty clear that they brought it upon themselves ever since they came out of that first woman's womb. Meanwhile, us demons, we don't get that original sin. Zyro. And where did you get that? Let's just say bonkers idea from. Callie. My pa told me that a while back. Zyro. Oh, Judas. I remember reading something about that in my social science class. That idea that us demons are exempt from original sin was propaganda brought by Lucifer, who just wanted an excuse to gut every sinner who ended up in Pandemonium's domain. This then persisted throughout the millennia generations later. Callie. And so what? Even if Lucifer began that idea, I still read news that Malifern and Nagana hold those values too. This is something that's all over the realm, and for good reason. While maybe humanity has some bright individuals, you can't deny that we just can't let them roam around the streets freely. We happen to get the worst of their crop. It's only right we torture them. Parsnell. Worst of their crop? My grocer whom I buy all my fruit from is a sinner, and while he might have been condemned for overdosing on some drug heroin, I think, he's not the worst. He treats me like a part of his family, always with a friendly, if droopy face. I always think that it was unfortunate circumstances that led all the sinners being sent down here. Callie. But that doesn't disprove the fact that nearly 10% of humans down here are murderers, or worse. You ever think about the world war going on upstairs? Them, all of those homicidal soldiers rotting from the battlefields above, they're spreading their ideas onto us, especially the Italians and Germans. Why do they deserve our sympathy when they are worsening the city the longer they're left unattended? Zyro. God damn it, Callie. You're sounding a hell of a lot like those wrathful sinners drowning in the Styx. Can't you relax? They're not going to raise the realm from the ground with their wars or sins. The ones that walk free, they're only capable to because their decay hasn't hit them. That means they haven't let evil or whatever consume their soul. They want a chance at a normal life. They want redemption. Callie. And maybe they can start that salvation by leaving Corpi alone for once. They've already caused enough problems with the sinner's war. Mr. Helos. That's quite enough, you three. If I hear but another utterance of human or sinner again, I will send you all to the principal's office. For now, you're all getting detention after school. I don't want to hear any more political humanist talk in the air I breathe. Zyro. Isn't Don Quixote supposed to make us reflect on human nature? Sounds pretty political to me. Mr. Helos. Oh, can it already? Hopefully, the way that I read this was okay. I just want to make sure that people know who's talking, because I find it difficult to keep track of a number of voices when I'm just kind of going at it. If I took some time and cultivated a voice for each character, I could do that, but I unfortunately do not have time to do that for each entry or for individual entries in general when kind of trying to get these out. I really like these classroom scenes, though. I feel like you do a good job of making these teens really sound like teens. They sound like they know what they're talking about, but only in the way in which a teen does, which is from the stuff that they've heard important people around them, whether that's on the radio or their parents or like the grocer guy that they know. I think it's well executed in that respect. For day 347, the prompt was, are there options for recorded audio media in your world? This comes from ScrubsyBoy844 in the Discord. Prebwin the Great writes, Vocal Crystals, an entry in What Lies West. The old Empire of the West is perhaps the most curious civilization in the world. It has left behind many an arcane curio, from ancient weapons with no keys to monolithic golems with no life in them. The ancients that inhabited this land before the known world was even drawn were quite the inventors. One of their ancient creations that can still be found to this day are what is known as vocal crystals. These small, inconspicuous gemstones are laden with ancient script, the alien language of the old empire. Select scholars, those who have studied the West the longest, have managed to decipher parts of the language used in the West. The writing placed upon these vocal crystals is the command word to activate them, and though it took some time to figure out the spoken word, as that is an entirely different challenge, eventually one of these vocal crystals was activated. The story told by these crystals is, rather unfortunately, completely indecipherable. The words and tales within have been eroded by sand and time, coming out as a garbled mess of sounds and growls. To this day, not a single crystal has been in any way even remotely coherent, but that won't stop merchants from buying them up for a pretty platinum. Man, I really like the direction you went with this, which is esoteric technology that they kind of can't figure out, but then the moment that they get like the word right, it's all just garbled junk, just completely eroded away the actual data that was stored inside. Kendamarania writes, Whispers in the Wind, an entry in Return to Faelund. The clay man wandered the elven fields for days on end, or at least what felt like days. In truth, he had no idea if time was even marching forward for him, and the tide clock that was given to him by the mischievous goblins was a total scam, but he found pleasure in walking the flower beds as the wind rolled the grass like great waves. By now, he would have reached the capital city of Auhminous, but he found nothing in the valley where it rested, only forests as far as his muddy eyes could see. The clay man chose to rest under the pines, happily crafting flower crowns and bouquets with his large, oversized hands. The wind was still rustling the leaves, breezing softly past the clay man. However, he could spot something in the bushes, something that seemed to have a furry tail. A voice called from the forest, a small but confident beckoning. Man of dirt and ceramic, why have you come to my domain? The clay man stood up, looking around. Who are you? I'm looking for whatever an elf is. My creator requested that I retrieve one. The furry tail emerged from the bush, revealing a tiny red fox wearing a crown of sticks. I am the Fox King, ruler of the kingdom they left. I'm afraid you are too late, for all the elves are gone. How can you be king of a domain that doesn't exist anymore? The clay man tilted his head. The Fox King chuckled, grinning his sharp teeth. I am king because all the delicious food, the berries, mice, birds, and eggs were simply left behind by them, and no one wants to try competing for my fill. Oh, the clay man dejected, his face drooping. So there are no elves to retrieve to my master. Only their voices were left behind. Would that suffice? How can their voices remain if they've all gone? He asked innocently. The Fox King grinned again, with sharpness in eyes as he snatched the clay man's bouquet with his mouth. The valley we sit here is filled with magic. The wind, too, is no exception. Flower petals flew in the air as the breeze picked up once more, their colors swirling in a wondrous kaleidoscope before falling to the ground. The wind seemed to giggle as it passed by, and the clay man could discern that it were the sounds of children, both female. The wind holds memories and secrets stretching back thousands of years. Lesser Fae don't know this, for they never listen in to what it has to say, the Fox King pointed out. The clay man crouched down at one of the petals. On it, ink was written on each, and every one with little phrases on them. The one he picked up said, Liesel, come back. When his breath blew on the petal, the ink disappeared, and the child's voice muttered it once again in the wind. He gasped upon the realization, not even realizing that he absorbed the petal into his wet body. This is elven magic. Unbelievable. The boss will love this. The clay man listened further to the wind, hearing the voices spiral around him. They muttered names to each other. Liesel, wait for me. The witch will get us if we aren't careful, it whispered. We've never had these sorts of adventures where I come from, it giggled back. Where you come from must be pretty weird, human, it replied. Petals were circling him, repeating the words the wind was uttering on ink. The clay man caught as many as he could and absorbed them into his body before he couldn't fit any more. Thank you for the advice, strange fox, the clay man widely smiled. I think I might stay a while. These lands are so queer. The Fox King held up a paw. I don't just hand these out in a basket. Right. He searched his body and handed him the fruits he stole from the goblin market, oranges, cherries, and plump unpecked raspberries. The clay man ventured further into the forest, following the wind wherever he went. Man, this really gives me Oz vibes. I like this a lot. Man, honestly, Kendamarania, this one takes me back into a nostalgic place of reading more than I think anything I've read in Worldhammer or Shoutout Saturday, its progenitor. So I was very delighted getting to read this. Hopefully you enjoyed the voices I chose. Like as always, I kind of just go with the gut, and we see where it takes us. For day 348, the prompt was, what is a recent academic discovery in your world? There were no results for this prompt up until me recording this basically the day before release, and while technically Predwin has a result later on that incorporates the ideas of this prompt, we didn't have one that was directly for day 348, so I did end up incorporating my own. So I wrote The Yati Mystery, an entry in Atovia. An extensive paper written by Ildo Carpati, one of the leading Draconos wizards. The Yati Mystery. By utilizing new achromatic lens telescoping instruments, I've observed anomalies on the surface of that moon we call Yati. These discoveries, I believe, have confirmed those mythologies of Hikari and Yami which describe their final home as Yati. Additionally, what I have observed points to possible life existing at large across the surface, not a landscape covered in platinum orchids, but instead industry and signs of civilization. Consistent examination of the surface of Yati over the course of a single turn reveals roughly half a degree of wobble. Shapes spotted on the surface migrate minor amounts over month-long periods before returning to their original position, only noticeable after precise drawing and measurements taken each week. The shapes in particular appear only after magnification of more than 30 times is achieved. This appears to sufficiently pierce through the extensive light pollution exuding from Yati's surface at all times. I further observe that Yati indeed goes through subtle phases, and during the first week of a month requires additional magnification to observe structures, as it seems to be reflecting additional light from Level, as was correctly hypothesized by the mysterious Dor Thurmond Worthier in What Regular Luminance Changes on Yati's Surface Tell Us About Our Place in the World. When I refer to observing structures, I mean a number of many small shapes and patterns which extend across the entire visible surface of Yati in a way which does not resemble organic growth. Instead, it is difficult to surmise anything but the visual patterns of a structured society creating dotted cities, aqueducts, palaces, and farmland. While at first unconvinced, I was later given much more difficult to refute proof when I noticed a new set of circles appear where none had been before. This relatively rapid growth, and no visible loss of structure over my observation, seems to hint at a currently peaceful, perhaps even utopian society under the assumed rule of Hikari. I will thoroughly outline my journey to these conclusions and provide my sketches in abundance to be examined and cross-referenced for accuracy and further discourse. For day 349, the prompt was, are there any peoples in your world that are rarely contacted? This comes from Predwin the Great in the Discord. Kendamarania writes, men from the fields we know. An entry in Return to Faelund. The goblins' night market was bustling as usual under the twilight of the 2 moons, all of the wild things of the field sprawling from their holes and bushes to come and barter. From each and every caravan, the goblins were waving their wares, barking, come by, to the grassland spirits. One wagon was selling peculiar foreign toys not seen in all of Faelund, perhaps all of the realm. None of the spirits knew what they were, nor were they interested in buying. However, one of these spirits approached the goblin selling it. Sir, what are these? The paper spirit asked while inspecting a pink doll made of a smooth, glossy material.
These are toys from the human domain. Retrieved them from the fallen elven city myself.
The goblin grinned his golden teeth.
That prince has a whole treasure trove of this junk just by his throne room, just ripe for the taking.
Huh. The spirit brushed the doll's silky, fake blonde hair. Humans are strange creatures, aren't they? I've heard so many stories of a human girl walking these fields. Do you suppose these were hers?
Probably. It's hard to tell for certain,
the goblin answered.
I'm just grateful that another hasn't come by in a long while. The big folk, with their monkey-like hands and strange behaviors, they're better off in their own fields.
Why haven't they come by, then? Asked the paper spirit, for she knew little of lands beyond her grassland, far less other realms. That human girl sounded so nice with the elven prince. I'd love to meet her.
Who knows? I myself find that they're no longer interested in us fey folk. Their wanderlust extinguished. No more humans wish to seek the portal to us with their wardrobes and cabinets. They're scared of us now,
the goblin noted.
But I've also heard that the connection between us and the big folk is starting to sever by the wall of the Zoas and all that junk. Soon we'll be totally separate.
I didn't take you as a spiritual man. You believe in the Zoas causing this. The paper spirit lightened up.
It's only a superstition amongst us, the goblin shrugged. But do you think that one more will come before we cut off for good?
I certainly hope so. The paper spirit's drawn face smiled, ink swooshing up. If it's the last chance they will have, at least before the witches raise this realm from the ground again. The goblin yawned.
Good point. Are you gonna buy this also?
He pointed at the pink, glossy doll. Right. The paper spirit folded a crease on one of her hairs and tore it off smoothly, handing it to the goblin as a fair barter. Soon the night market drove off in their rickety caravans and wagons into the rising dawn. The spirit looked down at the doll, its painted, blue-eyed smile reflecting the moonlight as the wild things all came back to hiding in their holes and reeds. Okay, I do remember one of the really early Return to Faelund setting entries from Kendamarania was about sort of the decrease in belief in the Fae realm from the human realm and how they were sort of becoming more and more disparate over time, and it seems like this is a little bit of a discussion or piece of discourse in world about that very concept. For day 350, the prompt was, does your world have writing systems? If not, how do your citizens communicate? And this comes from XR Sharp Razor in the Discord. The Wanderer writes, Galactic Standardization. When the Forest Kingdom first began reaching out to the stars, they found a barrage of aliens unlike the other 2 planets and 7 inhabited moons of their star system. For a while, there wasn't any communication. While the majority of the galaxy they found were humanoid or mammalian enough that similar body language worked, this was not a universal thing. After the first 5 years, communications enough were established that a council was made, a committee derived from every sapient race available in order to make a single, unified writing system. It was not a very simple task. It took 6 Forest Kingdom years to establish a written form, and a decade or so after to get it fully integrated and learned on a wide-scale way. The system itself was fairly simple. 20 letters were devised of strict rigid lines and 20 for curved squiggly lines. Rigid letters were used in concrete facts, details, and logic. Squiggly lines are used in less concrete details, whether it be questions, expressions of emotions, or simply rhetoric. A pronunciation for each letter was initially developed, but dropped initially due to a lack of coherency for the council. This is a very interesting idea of an alphabet, a set of script devised to aid in the delineation of fact versus not direct fact. I mean, you could have all kinds of really fascinating. Someone could write a whole book in the rigid letters and it be a complete lie, and that could be a big controversy or something. That is kind of fun. Nugget writes, thank the Phoenicians, an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. Time for your thinly veiled history lesson from Nugget. Scribes were a common and early part of the development of civilization, so much so that China, Mesoamerica, Mesopotamia, and Egypt all independently created their own writing systems. We're mostly going to be keeping our eyes on Egypt, however, and their hieroglyphs. A kind of thick paper made out of the pith of the papyrus plant. From this, their writing systems were able to improve for better details, designing, and record keeping than the traditional clay tablet used to write a review on some really bad copper. Around the 12th to 10th century BDW or BC, most civilizations had developed their own writing system that no one else could understand. The Phoenicians, who traded with most of them, had a solution to this in creating a common alphabet of sounds based on Egyptian hieroglyphs that could be applied to most languages. From the Phoenician alphabet, we get early versions of languages like Hebrew, Arabic, Greek, Atlantean, and many more. Remember how easy it was to learn your ABCs? Thank the Phoenicians, they invented them. This shift in languages is the reason why the gods have a unique ability to become fluent in any language upon hearing or reading a word of it. It allows them to be able to interact with any mortal and each other smoothly. They often do not even realize it's something that's happening. To Emrys, he's still just speaking Atlantean, while everyone hears English, and Victor only knows the languages he learned growing up, English, German, Gaelic, and Latin. It's this blind spot that makes it so no one ever noticed Victor being able to communicate cleanly in every time period he's in, even absent-mindedly, talking to Emrys in his dead language of Atlantean. Unless they're specifically listening for it, they simply don't notice. As always, great little history lesson and fun nod to the sort of copper salesman joke. I appreciate these and the way that they kind of give us just a little peek at some slightly new or interesting info about what's going on here. For day 351, the prompt was, are there any important plants in your setting? And this comes from Pro and the Great in the Discord. Pro and the Great writes, marrow bushes, an entry in What Lies West. The ossuary reach is a sorta dry, kinda gross. You know what I mean? Some places are all gooey, some are damp, but the reach is just dry and full of holes. Hell, even the plants have holes in them. A lot of holes. Harold Green, an adventurer. Visual appearance: large, spherical sporocarp, faint red and solid yellow spots, white coloration, numerous gaping holes often housing small creatures, upwards of 5 feet tall and 4 feet across. Marrow bushes are a species of flora from the west, though calling it a plant may be incorrect, if only slightly. Marrow bushes are semi-large, upwards of 5 feet tall, spherical fungi that dot the desolate corpses of the ossuary reach. They are primarily a bleached bone-white color with small speckles of yellow and faint reds. Marrow bushes also possess numerous, upwards of 300, 1-inch holes across their fruiting bodies. These chambers lead into the internal chamber of the mushroom, opening up into a larger chamber where pricks make their nests. The problem, however, is that these marrow bushes are among the only sources of food within the ossuary reach, leading many an adventurer to anger the bush's occupants. Leaving the specifics for the archival of the pricks themselves, marrow bushes also act as food sources for many other creatures that wander the reach, such as the odd arcanosaur, or true natives like bone dogs and smaller ossuary titans. The strange, almost alien part of a marrow bush is the question of how they sustain themselves in the West. In fact, thus far, marrow bushes are some of the only large mushrooms found within the West, every other example of mushrooms being mats of mycelium, vampire weed in the Crimson Expanse, or the monolithic Corsair's balcony shelf mushrooms of the sorrowweed wailed, that grow on the Weeping Titans. But both of these mushrooms are directly next to or are capable of finding sources of moisture. The vampire weed taps into the souls of creatures that walk over it, siphoning out their blood with razor-sharp fangs as small as grains of sand. The Corsair's balcony are located in the sorrowed weald. Needless to say, they have enough water. But the marrow bushes are in the ossuary reach, where the only true sources of water are the marrow bushes. Some creatures can metabolize water from the blood of their prey, but marrow bushes are like balloons of liquid. Cutting into one will cause it to spill water out like a tap. Thus, many creatures in the ossuary reach source their water directly from these mushrooms. However, marrow bushes source their fluids, they remain as a second crux for the ecosystem of the ossuary reach, just behind the massive carcasses they grow from. Recommended dishes: stir-fries, meat substitute, stews, roasts, kebabs, and broth bases. Big fungi are always fun. I mean, Carhop is a really big fungi rider. We haven't got as much about that from him lately, but I like that Predwin's dipping into this section. I mean, mycelium are so cool. They're so weird and alien to us, even though they're like here with us on our own planet. For day 352, the prompt was, does your world have, or will it have, an apocalypse-level event? If yes, was it local or global scale? And this comes from Vexwyn in the Discord. Predwin the Great writes, Tribute. A combination of days 348, 349, and 352, an entry in what lies west. Now, Predwin and I are going to do a bit of a back and forth on this one again. I'm going to listen back to his recording and respond for the part that is mine. And hopefully you enjoy.
The harsh, bitter winds of the Void Dunes rattle the weary bones of a group of adventurers. They have been traveling for a long time, searching for this place. Among their number is a rare sight in the wastes of the West, a scholar of the Explorators Guild, hoping to have a conversation with the locals of the Void Dunes. The group of 13 slog their way through the dense dunes, trudging past a massive herd of beasts that graze on the small, hair-like umber grass poking just a finger's length through the sand.
Are we sure this is a good idea? It took a long time to get here in the first place. We're already short on rations. Can we really afford the tribute?
The group's elf, Virani, looks concerned-like to their leader, Gikrode who fells beasts, a lizardman.
Yes, our client
Gikrode pauses to shoot daggers at the scholar.
doesn't want to wait any longer.
Be angry at me all you wish.
Amon, the scholar retorts.
I paid you to find the Bathkar in this expedition, and you're the ones who agreed to my absurd terms.
The others remain silent, but aware. They constantly look out to the herd on their right, seeing the red paint over the void bisons, marking them as property of the giants that call this place home. Eyes shift between each silhouette, checking to make sure that none of the gray-skinned marauders isn't stalking them from the herd's midst.
Remind me, Virani, was it? How big are the Bathkar?
Amon asks.
However big you think they are, probably bigger. Some of the chieftains I've seen could swallow a man in a single gulp, I'm sure of it.
The scholar suddenly looks much less sure of himself. Finally, as if to break the tension, 3 hulking figures appear from the sandstorm, looming in front of the party. Hides hang from their shoulders, massive metal weapons rest in their palms, heads buried in the dark blue sand. They tower above any of the largest ogres back home in Koros, at least 16, maybe 18 feet tall. The tall, small one of the behemoths speaks with the weight of the world, a deep, rumbling voice that shakes bones.
Of course, mighty Bathka.
Gikrod gestures back to the rear guard, ushering them to unveil the cart they've been forced to drag for several days after a blight of grolls ate their mule. The guard nod and pull back the red carpet, revealing dried meats, spices, ale, butter, and sugary treats, all made as big as possible for the mighty giants in front of them. The 3 giants look amongst each other and smile.
Very well done, small one. Come. The chieftain would meet with such magnanimous guests.
The trek was long. The Bathkar titans that guided them seemed very, very annoyed at the slow walking pace of the party. Every 10 steps or so, the giants halted and waited tiredly for the adventurers to catch up. Eventually, whether out of genuine curiosity or to quench boredom, one of the Goliaths starts conversation with Gikrod.
What brings you here, small one? I have not seen one of your kind before. Are you ill?
The Bathkar looks down to the lizard folk, his massive face blotting out the barely visible sun that shyly pierces the storm.
No, I'm not ill. I come from a place full of water far from this place. Like others you may have met, but my home is covered by mighty trees. Though not as mighty as you, of course. I am what the common tongue names a lizard folk.
Lizard folk. I will remember this for the next time I meet one of your ilk.
Ilk, a noble's word. Truly you are very well learned, mighty Bathka.
Indeed I am. But you forgot part of my question, small one.
Ah, of course. Oh, inexorable Titan. You see this man in blue robes?
Gikrod gestures to Amon, who stares with awe at the Bathkar.
He is a man of intellect as well. You see, he has heard a great deal of the mighty Bathka, and would love nothing more than to learn of your ilk.
Why?
The giant's eyes narrow, addressing Amon now.
Oh, well, you see, my kind like books a great deal. Specifically, the books that relate to history and to the past. I come to ask the great and well-versed Bathkar of their own history. Are there any rememberers within your clan?
Rememberers?
Poets, novelists, storytellers.
The giant looks off into the distance, staring far away at the outline of the colossal rift, barely peeking through the sandstorm. He thinks for several seconds before answering.
The chieftain with Greg. He is old, the oldest. He is big, too. The biggest. He can answer any question, I think.
Well, Greg, I see. And what of you and yours, mighty Bathka? What are your names? Before long, the storm comes to a halt at the sight of two great wooden pillars. Glyphs of magic glow and dispel the wind surrounding the Bathka camp. The group of 12 shrink in dread, barring Gikrod, who walks with confidence. There are at least 50 of them here. From infants the size of a man to ancient, pockmarked elders that stand as tall as a bastion, all staring at the newcomers, some with curiosity, others with dismissal, but some of them with the hope that their toll was not good enough. They look disappointingly, though, as the group is walked to the biggest, most colorful teepee in the camp, for they know that it was the most generous toll. Inside the tent, a monolithic 25-foot-tall, at least, Bathka male stands. His hair is long and gray, trailing down his back and stopping just below his hips. His hands are pale, but well-defined with muscle. His attention is drawn to a canvas of solid linen, a gift from a previous group of adventurers. He places hefty strokes, each movement showing off his massive muscles. Not the kind just given to a Bathka, though. No, these were earned by picking very heavy things up and placing them back down. He pauses, placing one more blot of paint before finally turning to his audience.
Welcome, O honored adventurers. This must be a rich week for the City of Worms, mustn't it? What with you all coming to my sands and giving me such generous gifts. That is, I assume this is because of a most generous gift and not something more unfortunate. No, wise old Greg. These small ones have brought the greatest delights. We only ask for a portion of their gifts in exchange for guiding them on their journey. Very well. Present my toll to me, children of the East.
Gikrod nods and gestures once again to the rear guard to unveil the payload.
Very good. Very good indeed.
The Colossus kneels down to the cart, and though the portions are clearly far too small, his face still gives way to a childlike glee.
Meats, cheeses, and of course the greatest of delicacies.
Ulgrek reaches down into the cart and picks up the largest of the gifts, a keg of dwarven ale, 5 tons of it, enchanted with glyphs to lighten its load significantly.
Most generous of you, Eastborn. It even fits in my hand. Tell unto me, small ones, why have you come all this way with such dangerous prizes for the beasts to smell?
Amon steps forward and clears his throat while he nervously shakes. Well, mighty Ulgrek, I have come to ask you of your people's history. I wanted to ensure that I gave the most appealing gifts as I could in exchange for such a valuable prize, at least to my people, that is.
Indeed. That is all. Very well, very well. My sons of the winds, go and fetch some small chairs for my guests.
Of course, mighty Ulgrich. But
Yes, bring some for yourselves as well. It would be gluttonous of me to partake of this bounty alone.
The guards smile before departing, returning some time later with a handful of tiny stools, dusty and underused, as well as with some far larger boulders, fresh from the dunes. Everyone takes their seats, grabs their snacks and grog, and hold their breath as the chieftain leans in to speak.
Eons ago, when the Bathkar were not called that name, we ruled over a portion of a great kingdom. Mighty stone walls, taller than a beast thrice my size, and yet we were that size. Yes, we were taller than the clouds. Or so it is said. No, I think that we may have been a good bit taller, but the clouds are very, very tall. You know this. You have looked up.
Amon nods with Damar.
We ruled as proxies for a great king and his kingdom. We served him for generations under his eternal guidance. We waged war when he asked. We sowed fields when he commanded. We built cities when he deigned. It was purposeful. But one year, the king went silent. He hid away in his citadel of bone and spoke with us and all of his disciples no more. Our ancestors waited and waited, but as time went on, other things seemed to stop. The rivers stopped flowing, the crops stopped growing, the fields stopped sowing. Grass withered and died. Trees dried away, and rivers sunk into the earth. Then, when all was thought to be at its worst, it happened. The crawling sand came. The Bathkar were mighty, but armies cannot fight time, nor can any number of anything stop the march of the inexorable. Our ancestors did not run, though. We were the Bathkar! We were the strongest. But strength does not have even the slightest chance against an infinite foe that cannot bleed nor think. The others fled, if the stories are to be believed. But we stayed, and we shrunk, and we fought for territory. Now, what what was once hundreds of thousands is but hundreds. The Bathkar are defeated, and their death is slow.
Ulgrek looks down for a moment before taking a swig of amber mead. Amazing! Amon shouts.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much. Oh, the others won't ever laugh at me again. Come on. We have to get back to the city. Come on!
The party sighs with weary hearts as they heave themselves up. Gikrod looks at the wagon, then back to Ulgrek.
You can keep this if you like. Would make for a good source of kindle, I assume.
Or an excellent toy for the youth. Walk with swiftness, son of Molag.
Gikrod looks up at Ulgrek with a shocked expression, but smiles for a moment before he makes his leave behind the others.
We used to be bigger.
The large guard asks.
I don't know. I just made it up to make this never happy. War does reach, boss.
Fun. I think we got someone else in the Discord's voice, and I'm not sure who that is yet, but I will credit them if I figure that out later. I like this theming we get in What Lies West in regards to there's a lot of like academic intrigue in what's going on here. And it feels like you get the weird little academic people kind of invading all kinds of strange places where they don't really belong, but they do want to be. And this is a good example of that. And I think it's a cool look at this Bafka group that I think we've heard about but haven't seen much for. So thanks, Predwin, for that. And great voice acting and some editing as well. Good job as always. Goteryup wrote an untitled entry for day 352. In Frozen Gate, a text that talked about a method of obtaining unimaginable power talks about getting power from the blazing eye that all life feeds. And eventually, scientists decided to try harvesting the sun, believing it to be this blazing eye, which leads to the sun shattering over the course of a week. This causes the world to very quickly freeze over, with barely any cities managed to create mini-suns to keep them defrosted, and even fewer cities that could keep up with the energy requirements to keep the mini-suns running. Okay, we've not heard much from Goteryup before, and they haven't submitted much besides this one, but they seem to have a very interesting, like, post-apocalyptic world where the sun explodes. We have this highly technologically advanced society, apparently, that then creates mini-suns. Lots of fascinating stuff here that would be really interesting to see more of. So hopefully, Goteryup, you will share more with us. Vexwyn writes, "The end of the world as we know. Kalume is a unique realm in its essence, one side always facing the sun and one side in perpetual darkness, held in place by its two guardian gods, colossal dragons, that reign over the fire and frost. When humans first arrived in this world, such balance was viewed as unnatural, demonic. And so their role in this fresh new world became to tame Kalume's abnormalities. It took generations, but eventually they did it. One day, a valiant knight took down Moateri, the dragon god of winter, not knowing the consequences of defying the natural order that this would cause. With the death of one of the gods, the world itself started to shift, to move, beyond anything the folk in Kalume could ever imagine. The great desert eye raised in the sky and set on the horizon for the first time, and the ever-dark side was now exposed to it. But the worst was yet to come. With the change of the winds and the change of the ground itself, entire mountains roared, coastlines were erased by tidal waves, but even when the earth stopped mourning by its fallen god, the glaciers slowly fell under the desert's eye, blazing glare, creating an endless source that filled the oceans until it consumed most of the dry lands. Many died in these events, but adaptation for the ones that survived was far worse than death itself. That's right, Vexwyn has this tidally locked planet in the Kalume system, and then the idea of whatever magical thing is causing this, and you remove that, and then an orbit returns, which is very interesting. The death of the dragon imparts force that starts, or maybe the other dragon that's living is the one imparting the new force. However this works is very interesting. Then you get an apocalyptic event of suddenly everything is changing. The Wanderer writes, Endrin, a cyclic tale of woe.
Endron has had many apocalypses. Before time began, there was the war against the Great One, which brought Endron to its knees and was barely repelled. There was the Civil War of the Six Knights, and its cause, the death of Tyla. Any innocent left in the world retreated into only the best of things that could protect its virtue. While that might not sound like an apocalypse, it fundamentally changed existence for the worst, forever. The next one would be the end of the old world. The Elder Titans did battle against each other, and in the end of the landscape was so shattered that it does not resemble its old shape. Not many people survived, and thus began the first sealing of Endron. A thick layer of the floating isles was allowed to fall from the heavens, burying the old world of Endron under nearly half a mile of stone, though the newly formed seas spat most of that out. This was done to let most of the old world die and be buried. The ambient divine power of the slain Elder Titans was buried in Varakar. This sealing has taken place after each pantheon of gods withered out of power over 7 times thus far. Moreover, theirs was the death plague, the rise of the 9 evils, and many more than will be mentioned, and those will not be the last to come. That will be the final war, ending when the gate of midnight is opened for the first time. That will be a war that will last near endless years, millions of them to be certain. Evil will have escaped his prison and brought his vast armies to war, gathering as many of the horrors that he can to rally one last war against creation. As the war reaches its height, it is said that the hero of legend, Corin, will rally the peoples to do battle one last time, and when the battle ends, when the last life on creation is gone save for Belivor himself, he will open the gate of midnight, and existence will end. I love Endron's just simple fact of existence. At least the way that most of the Wanderer's writing sounds is that the Endron mythology, the predictions of the future and the things that he writes about from the past are all just fact. These are the things that have happened and will happen. It's a very interesting take on world building that I find sort of fascinating because I think a lot of us try to be very realistic with interpretations of history and weird philosophies that may or may not be true. But Endron is like just this world rooted in like strange, almost uncanny truth. Curio Heart writes, Apocalyptic End. Writing, character, and voice acting by Curio Heart. World building by Auhminous and Curio Heart. So Curio Heart has recorded specifically what is going to come after this tiny prelude that I will read. The city of Valley Forge has endured long enough to have seen its share of crises, though few, if any, have been considered apocalyptic. But has there really been none in this dystopia, or are the vast majority simply unable to see it? Here, however, we have the words of the city's tyrannical architect, a truly titanic man everyone knows of, even if few know who he is, on the apocalyptic end of Valley Forge. The transcript may be found below.
Once, we lived believing that it would be war that would destroy the world. One day we were told someone would drop the biggest and worst bombs, would fire the most destructive missiles ever created, sparking a global catastrophe as warheads would land anywhere and everywhere a target value existed. Reality, however, is far more sobering. In the end, it wasn't war that put us in this situation, grappling with a hostile environment and gradually worsening conditions. There was no sudden escalation, no shots fired or nuclear warheads to change everything all at once. No, it came far more insidiously. It came in the form of big dreams and small changes that added up faster than anyone realized or could foresee. It came as presents wrapped in pretty paper and shiny bows. It came as new ways to travel and communicate. It came with more convenient ways to accomplish our tasks and altered how we perceive our goals. It came with more and better ways to discover and research and share. It came, perhaps most tragically, with the hope
for a better tomorrow. It came because we were hypnotized by its naive architects who had fallen prey to a short-sighted life and future as they found themselves confronting something so far beyond them that the danger wasn't even perceived. It came because what we were led to believe we needed would only ever demand more and more from everything else, including, and perhaps especially, us. It came because we became complacent and exhausted as we strove to keep up with ever-growing demands. It came because we sold ourselves for ideas we only thought we had a stake in. It came when we chose to alter that which is too unpredictable, too complicated, too delicate to ever master. Now, we're trying to survive in the hell we created for ourselves, completely dependent on what slowly kills us to survive. In the end, it came because of us. In the end, it came for us. And nobody knows just how far down the spiral will take us. Nobody. Except me.
Perhaps one of Curio Heart's most sort of direct world-building, veiled sort of critiques of modern society, I think, that we've gotten so far, and a very interesting one. I like this a lot. I think this has lots of cool nods to things in real life, but also things that are central to the world that is being constructed by Curio and Auhminous here. Nugget writes, "The End of Time, an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal." Victor Percival Cogwin. Moores felt dread build in the background of his throat as he read the ink-black name. He knew this would happen eventually. Man can outrun any god but Moores, hide from any god but him. Time always catches up eventually. Moores stood up, taking a deep breath as they did so. "Is it time?" a voice in the background of his head asked. "Quiet," Moores muttered. Chaos knew just as he did. Victor's health had been declining for some time now. He had been watching. He had always been watching. Pain in his legs and back that got chronic enough to start using a cane, and exhaustion in his stance from more than a lack of sleep, and in the past few weeks a cough that never got better. Pneumonia, according to his book. He had been rotting in bed, Emrys's bed, for weeks now, barely able to eat. Even now, through his severed eye, he could see Emrys pleading with him, begging him to let him heal him. Listen to him, Victor, but he knew his mental prayers would do just as little. Victor wanted to die. Even when his death marks the beginning of the end, Victor always knew he would die one day, and never once had the urge to push back on that reality. Moores meandered the streets of London. Emrys had long had enchantments on his estate, making it impossible for any of the gods to find him. Moores knew about where he lived, but it still required some poking around, and even then he was always unable to enter his home. He eventually found the bookshop. The air around it seemed stiff in a way Moores had long gotten used to with his job. The stiff, gloomy air which surrounded someone in their last moments, surrounded by family and friends in quiet recognition of this fact. Moores lifted their hand, placing it on the barrier in front of him. He always wondered what would happen if someone died in Aurelius's dead zone. How did Victor even show up in his book if he'd be unable to collect him properly? Just as they were hoping they'd be unable to even retrieve Victor, he felt it. The barrier around the estate warbled and flickered, and at the same time he heard what sounded like a light bulb shattering. Moors felt their stomach knot as they realized exactly why Victor was no longer safe. Emrys's magic fails when he's stressed. At a certain point, that must include the enchantments around his house. Sure enough, the failing barrier soon became severe enough for Moors to simply step through it between the flickering, and for the first time since the war, walked up to his ward's door. He stood there for some time. Locks never applied to him, but part of him still wondered if he should knock. It had been so long since he'd last seen his daughter in person. Moors doubted he'd be happy to see him now. His dilemma was soon solved by itself as the door opened, and before him was an aged husk of the self-proclaimed God of the Sun. Emrys's aging was always the first to go when his magic plugged. He looked around the same age as Victor, maybe a bit younger, hair mostly gray, clothes slightly baggy on him, and face wrinkled and creased with an expression of worry and fear. He looked like he was on the verge of tears. "You know why I'm here, Aurelius," Moors said, simply, yet softly. "No," Emrys breathed. "No, you are not welcome here. Get out. Leave." "I'm sorry." Moors walked inside, despite Emrys's protests. The once impressive shop creaked and groaned as they walked. Every light, every candle had long been extinguished, and the rooms seemed to shrink. "You've been poisoning his mind this entire time, haven't you? Moors, please, I can't lose him. I can't let you do this, please." Emrys visibly aged as he begged, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Emrys's joints burned as he followed up the stairs. He usually used magic to avoid his chronic pain, but even on foot, he was far too desperate to pay it any mind. Moors! Why was he even bothering? When has Moors ever gone off book? "Moors, please, if there is still 1 ounce of your soul that still loves me after everything I've done, you'll let him leave. Please." Moors looked at him with pity. "You know I do, but you also know I can't." Moors approached the door to the bedroom where Victor was. "I'll let you say goodbye." Emrys looked at Moors, tears welling in his eyes and his lips trembling, but ultimately walked inside without another word. He walked to Victor's bedside, the human shriveled and frail under the blankets with stark white hair. "Is that Moors?" Victor asked. Emrys opened his mouth, trying to respond, but his throat and chest felt too tight to speak. He nodded instead. Victor looked toward the doorframe, seeing the distinct, glowing purple eye of Moors as he held an open book. He smiled faintly at death before turning back to Emrys. "It's all right, Emrys." No, it isn't. I can't let him take you, please. I can still heal you. I just can't. I can't lose you." His voice felt thick as tears began to pour down his face. I love you." Victor placed a shaky hand on Emrys's cheek. "I love you too. I'm sorry I never said so sooner." And with his last words, he pulled Emrys closer and kissed him. Emrys wrapped his arms around Victor as they did so, not wanting the moment to end. Victor went limp. Emrys held on even tighter with a sharp gasp. Moors looked down at his book, seeing the page and name, Victor Percival Cogwin, glowing a vibrant emerald green. It was done. Emrys sobbed, aging all the more rapidly, still clutching Victor's body, seemingly unwilling to open his eyes to see him dead. Moors lifted their hand, wondering if he should do anything to comfort Emrys before deciding against it. Moors dissolved into black smoke before reforming outside. It was dark now, and only getting dimmer. With Victor dead, there was nothing keeping time alive. With nothing keeping time alive. Moors felt a white, hot pain tighten around his neck as Chaos's crystal shattered, and his ears rang with sharp laughter. He collapsed to the ground from the agony of the sever before flicking through the pages of his book to Victor's page, glowing green just a moment before the ink briefly shone silver, before the entire page dissolved into dust before his eyes. He had never seen such a thing happen before, but had little time to ponder it as he heard the same voice which had been tormenting him for centuries now call out to him. "Look at the sky, Grim, the sky!" Moors looked up at a face exactly like his own, smiling maniacally, then up towards the sky as Chaos instructed, the bright red sky staring back at him. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grim. Welcome to the end of time." So we've got this is the second very depressing sort of end-of-the-world scenario in the other world that Nugget works on that we've gotten now. But well written, very well written, actually. I feel like I really need to practice stuff like this, these very slow-paced, personal scenes. It's something that I think a lot of the other writers in the Discord are quite good at, but I'm just very unpracticed with. And you did a great job, Nugget. For day 353, the prompt was, what is a common bodily marking in your world? And this comes from ScrubsyBoy844 in the Discord. The Wanderer writes, Starkling Empire colored bands. This comes from, I think, one of the only alternate settings that the Wanderer has, the Forest Kingdom setting. The Starkling Empire is a nation that holds great national pride. While their economy, tech, and military is weaker than each of the big three superpowers in their specialties, but they hold near enough to be a galactic contender. And that, in and of itself, is enough reason for them. Their government heavily encourages it as well, and in many parts, either due to their emperors usually doing well, or because of the codex that allows them to kill that emperor if he fails, there's pride. So the question that arose amongst them became, how do we show it? While joining the military was an answer, showing up to rallies to support it was an answer. People wanted more. So colored bands were invented and produced exclusively in the Starkling Empire. They operate like a usual freeze band initially. However, not unlike a tattoo, a microscopic layer is added under the skin, seeping into the damage. When the skin fully heals, it's there forever or until removed. It has an iridescent sheen to it and can change colors when exposed to certain frequencies. As a result, a person can change the colors of their bands as many times as they'd like. Hype for these was generated by social engineering. Initially, it was released as a very expensive and hard-to-acquire marking. Elites were encouraged to get theirs done, and soon it was marked as a patriotic elite symbol. It had a scarcity to it that made everyone want one. Then they gradually let bootlegged, actually the professional-made ones, versions escape around the empire that were conveniently legal and very affordable. This kept the feeling of a patriotic individual needing to seek out the ability to show their elite status. Gradually, they were made fully widespread and accessible, but by then were a strong cultural fad. An added and officially unintended outcome was that these colored brands can easily be scanned easily and pick out which life forms have them and which do not. So effectively a way to mark citizens that are in deep on the sort of propaganda of the Empire. The last day of Worldhammer Episode 3 is day 354. The prompt was, what is a country/place that has a large amount of immigration or lack thereof? And this comes from The Wanderer in the Discord. The Wanderer writes, the Elven Realms, despite being a free haven, why are there so few non-elves? A fellow herald, an arch-herald to be precise, was pondering upon a question when I was giving my reports, that being he questioned why everyone wasn't moving into the Elven Realms to enjoy their near-utopian realms. There are a few reasons for this. The largest, and perhaps only for some, is that while the elves gave a vast majority of the world to the younger fledgling races, they did keep some to themselves. And because the elves struggle greatly to maintain their population, their cities have barely grown at all. As a result, most of the elves live scattered about the entire realms. They do, however, tend to keep a large buffer space between their homes and other nations. One could wander into their realm for a day or two before finding anything the rest of the world calls civilization. Moreover, they very often live in forests with roads marked well in their culture, but near invisible to anyone unfamiliar with them. This leads to a problem. While the elves operate under a free haven philosophy, entering their realm does not. Any mass migration movements requires either extreme desperation or great preparation. These exoduses have been noted in history, but only in great apocalypses or when one was expected. During these times, the elves have almost always gathered their forces to be Endred's protectors once more. However, despite hospitality of the elves being great, it is hard for a shorter race to feel fully at home. It's been described as a hazy dream by those who left. Your needs are cared for, but for many it's too stagnant. You can live your whole life there, and perhaps your neighbor's door will change color in that time. To shorter races, its peace can be unnerving. There are other reasons, though, that being that many kingdoms do not take kindly to their populace leaving, and outlaw their departure and hunting down who they consider deserters. Okay, I like these reasons a lot, actually. These are very convincing to me, the idea that you have a utopia, but its existence is so culturally bound to the way that elves function that other races that do not live as long just feel discomforted when they're there. It's sort of the classic problem you see come up in a lot of sci-fi, especially where if you're given a fantasy dream world that's the best possible place you could live in, that is a utopia for you that you can live in endlessly, you get tired of it and it begins to break your brain, the brain of a mortal at least. And then also the outlawing of people just leaving your nation makes a lot of sense as well. I like this. Kendamarania writes, a riot on Galileo Street, an entry in City of Woe. Trigger warning for description of police brutality. So I read this one, and I wanted to provide just a little bit extra trigger warning, because there are themes within this that match up pretty closely to some pretty current political and newsworthy events that have occurred in America, and I want to be really sensitive of people that have taken these to heart. I myself have been really affected by these, and I think I know a lot of other people that have been. So be careful listening to this one if that's something that will get to you, that maybe is going to bring you down. I don't want that to be anything that happens with Worldhammer, but I'm going to read this because I do think it's well written. I think Kendamarania did a good job with this and writing it in a relatively nuanced way. But please listen at your own discretion. A riot has sparked. On the intersection between Galileo and Socrates Street, in the heart of heresy, a riot has begun amongst its residents. A Danubian fish grill joint was getting looted and torched to the ground by the owner's fallen angel neighbors. Every other resident of the block was either joining in or trying to disperse the crowd. These 100-odd people have lived together all their lives, raised each other's children, and aided in their shared poverty. Like other communities in heresy, they were primarily immigrants from hell and beyond. Demons, fallen angels, freed sinners lived under one roof, with nearly 30 different languages being spoken. They were all given the same promise upon arriving at the shores of Corpi, the chance to gain better afterlives. Instead, they were given broken dreams and systemic discrimination by the city, having to integrate in the minority ghettos. Still, they found comfort and community with each other until this night. A riot has sparked. A riot is burning. It began with nothing but petty arguments between the Danubians and fallen angels under a scorching hot day. They yelled at each other for 5 minutes to speak in their own native tongues while ordering their skewers. One of the angels was a young man named Camiel, who was banned from playing his beloved guitar on the sidewalk despite that his music gave joy to his friends and neighbors who passed by. He demanded the entire neighborhood boycott the grill, to no avail. Still, hatred began to brew on the street, pointing brother against brother. The Danubians blamed the sinners for dirtying the neighborhood. The sinners turned against each other, blaming one another for their deaths. Earthly racism and xenophobia finally surfacing after decades while decrying the angels for failed judgment. The fallen angels blamed the Danubians for ruining the city with their war, despite that they all knew none of them ever served in the military. Millennia-old fears, ancient as biblical times, returned to all of its residents. In the evening, Camiel and his band confronted the owners, escalating until they smashed his guitar on the floor. The angels finally gave in and smashed the grill window, citing everyone in the block to join in. The police were called, and with hatred consuming them, choked Camiel to death with their batons. A riot is burning. A riot is dying. None of the tenants owned guns or weapons. They instead used whatever they could use, bats, pipes, chairs. Some of the demons even came down to the underground to grab the metal coffins that were burning the heretics, setting them free. Incoming policemen and firemen hosed down the crowd while they cried in their languages. "Pigs!" some of the Americans yelled. "Hamanoquad!" the fallen angels cursed in Enochian. The Danubians had to evacuate to a friend's apartment as they watched the restaurant burn down, the rioters looting and destroying the place while releasing fire from the metallic coffins. That fish grill, a place that has stood the test of time for 3 generations, feeding the block since they were children, was now ablaze. Camiel's body burned down with it along with his guitar. Some of the police called their Malvagi friends and they pulled up with their atomics. They fired on the crowd and 2 people died as well as the riot dispersed to their homes. A riot is dying. A riot is smoldering. A funeral will be held later for Camiel and the 2 victims. The Danubians have called on the neighborhood to pay for their property damage. Hatred is still heating on the block. No one can trust each other now. How can they live with this? How can we live with this? A riot is smoldering. This is, I think, a good nuanced look at a riot. The sort of like no-win scenario that truly violent stuff like this causes. Probably Great writes, the final entry in Worldhammer Episode 3. Balfora, east of the west, an entry in What Lies West. Balfora is the mapped region of the western continent. That name has yet to be agreed upon as of yet. It borders the only entryway into the west, accessible from the largest city in the world, the City of Worms. Desolate dwarven holds, empty orcish bastions, and other void cities are sprinkled throughout the region of Balfora. It seems that long, long ago, many of the folk found in Koros across the Ocean Magnimus are originally from Balfora. Balfora, other than the ancient cities within its borders, is characterized by its vastly different ecosystems in its northern half. Dense pine tree rainforests, monolithic ocean cliffsides, and even a desert or two are all things you can find in Balfora's northern half. The Land Cleaver. Speaking of halves, Balfora is home to the largest river in the known world, the Land Cleaver River. Often just called the Land Cleaver, this river, at its widest point, would take 4 days to walk across. The Land Cleaver's bank is so large that at many points it seems completely flat across the horizon, despite how irregularly it moves when mapped. The Land Cleaver is the lifeblood of many towns upon its embankment, with the largest New Era keep in Balfora being upon its eastmost point on the Eternal Delta front. This city, and many others on the Landcleaver, can easily trade with one another, as the calm waters on the Great River are easy to navigate. In fact, the Landcleaver currently houses more ships in its waters than anywhere else in the world combined, an estimated 200 cargo ships. The Landcleaver hold many records, in fact, longest river, widest river, most tributaries, largest swamp, most commonly mistaken for an ocean. On that latter point, many newcomers to Balfora that didn't come into the region from the river sometimes get turned around when they see it. Wasn't I going north? Why is the ocean here? Is a common question to guards posted on riverside hamlets. The Blackwood. On the topic of getting turned around, to the northernmost region of Balfora lies the Blackwood. The Blackwood is the largest mundane forest in the known world, not counting Moolug, because it's less dense and a mire not a true forest. The Blackwood is home to the undeniable tallest trees in the world, however. At their tallest, these massive trees reach heights of 900, sometimes over 1,000 feet tall. Their only competition, the weeping titans of the sorrowed Weald, come close, but the immense heat of the west forces them into complacency. The trees of the Blackwood have millennia to grow. Perhaps they once reigned across the Wormscale reaches, before whatever apocalypse occurred destroyed everything, but nowadays they are lonely giants with nothing else like them. The Blackwood is remarkably flat for its proximity to the Wormscale reaches, with only small hills and dips being the only variance in elevation within the forest. It makes it easy to lose your way, and the tall trees that block the sky out prevent the use of stars to navigate. Many people choose to ignore the Blackwoods, choosing to remain in proximity to the City of Worms as it's the only known route into the west. The same goes for why folk don't venture south, that and the lack of resources. Kabas Ka. Moving south, bordering the Landcleaver River, Kabas Ka is the name given to the ash-choked regions of Kabas Vuld, Ash Valley, and Kabas Veld, Ash Prairie. Kabas Ka has been choked out by west-blowing winds carrying the smog of the Kabas Kaldor, Ash Mountains. Though the damage isn't as extreme as the blight caused by the Frasmalagragra Mountains back in Koros, Kabas Ka's Ash Place is still the last place you want to be caught in the elements. Crops cannot grow, birds cannot breathe, man and more are not meant to live in this place. Only 2 cities exist within this realm, and both are cloistered, ancient dwarven holds. Still, the Kabas Kaldor draw in plenty of miners willing to risk their lungs for the ore seams dancing across their surface. Iron, silver, and rarer magic metals like mithril and adamantine are more than worth the danger, it seems. Highborn Lowlands. Named by those who live above the Landcleaver River, the region's true name, Western Koros, is almost entirely ignored by any outsiders that talk about the place. The Highborn Lowlands is ruled largely by the Conrad family, who work directly under orders from Maximilian Thaddeus. The Highborn Lowlands are comprised of vast, flat fields that stretch on seemingly forever. They make a great home for cattle and have been perfect for building massive cities over the last century that folk have immigrated west to Balfora. South of this region, the fields stretch on seemingly forever, getting hotter for a while as they meet the equator, but nobody has been further south than that. Within the fields are a species of heavy-feeding grass that greedily claims all the nutrients, the reason for the lack of trees. There are rivers, but they never get wider than a carriage. The soil isn't great for growing crops either, forcing folk to remain where they are lest they risk starvation. The lowlands are mostly home to small game, like rabbits and fowl that can easily hide in the mantle grasses of the region that a person can easily get lost in during the morning and evening. Some pilgrims have gone south to find places to build, but none have sent letters back. Whether they found what they were looking for or not, it will take centuries to find out as the focus of everyone is drawn to the west. Green Country. The mid-eastern region of Balfora, Green Country, is where many orcs have migrated to after the revolution's end 100 years back. Green Country is welcoming to outsiders, but the folk here don't suffer thieves or bandits. If you are blamed, you are guilty. At least until the orcs can figure their laws out. They're new to this whole government thing, you know? Anyways, their government, officially called Orc-Rule, is obviously new, but with the orcs doing many of the construction and logging jobs back in Koros, they are perhaps the best people for making a kingdom from scratch out of anyone else. The country's proximity to the ocean Magnimus has led to a surprising amount of trade despite the orcs being, well, orcs. The other 2 factions bordering the ocean aren't popular either. To the north, the Waywards are just as likely to rob you as they are to actually do trade, and to the south, representatives of the Conrad family will tax you into oblivion. The orcs have earned a great deal of favor with traders then, for they offer fair tax and safe travel on their half of the Landcleaver River. This has led to a strong unity between orcs and ratfolk merchants who have entered a long-standing agreement of trade. Landcleaver Basin. The Landcleaver Basin holds within its cradle many dwarven holds, all of which have been reclaimed by the various clans that have come to Balfora in search for answers to their ancient evacuation. The largest dwarven clan, the Great House of Horadrin, has spent hundreds of thousands of gold shillings on funding expeditions into the southern parts of Kabas Kaldor. though they have sent a handful into the northern parts surrounding the Dwaks of Cabas-Vold. The Dwarven clans are largely at war with the small pockets of bandits that have taken their ancient holds for themselves, namely the Waywards, who have taken 2 entire great holds within the Cabas-Vold. The basin itself is characterized by its constant mist and frequent drizzling from light rainstorms. The basin makes for bad farming, but frequent visits from migrating birds and the vast numbers of fish inside of the Landcleaver River and its tributaries in the area more than make up for the lack of food. The dwarves also released many boars into the area, whose population has boomed as of late, allowing the dwarves or anyone else in the area to hunt them year-round without risk to their disappearance. Prairie of Worms. Largely associated with the City of Worms due to proximity, the Prairie of Worms is anywhere you can still see the city, no matter how barely you manage it. Essentially, the Prairie of Worms ends as soon as the colossal city disappears over the horizon. The Prairie of Worms doesn't have any New Age cities within its bounds, as all who have come here have only come for the City of Worms. The Prairie of Worms, though, unlike the southernmost fields of Balfora, possesses extremely high soil quality, full of phosphorus and nitrogen. The outskirts of the City of Worms is covered with flowing wheat and vegetable fields owned by various guilds within, though the Conrad family owns most. West March Hills. The West March Hills are the second smallest region, just above the Prairie of Worms, and are home to many small villages, namely along the northern half of the Landcleaver River. The West March Hills don't possess any ruler, though the Waywards and a high number of risen ones make their home there. The West March Hills are home to many wild bison and mammoths, like most of the Lawless North and the Blackwood. This has made room for settlers to tame some of the beasts and use them to plow fields and drag carts. All of these regions are constantly under extreme traffic as more and more adventurers, farmers, smiths, and scholars make their way across the Ocean Magnimus to Balfora, or rather, to the west. I feel like you've got just a fantastic swath of areas, Bredwin. I know you've put in a lot of work trying to build out a lot of unique places in the What Lies West setting, and you've done a great job, and they all have their own sort of features and unique aspects, and you've got some of the politics and the, sort of cultures and economies and worked out, situations with rulers and how people feel about each other in a way that feels so compelling, even though I know it's not, crazy fleshed out yet. It still is something you could really just sit yourself in and feel very immersed in. You've done fantastic with this setting so far, even though you haven't even been working on this that long. That brings us to the end of Worldhammer Episode 3. I encourage you to come and join us. Please, we really want as many writers as we can get, even if it means that I have to be more selective with what we end up reading. We want as many people and as many worlds represented as possible. So thank you so much for listening, and may your world never be lost in the fires of the forge of the Worldhammer.